I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the April 7th, 2026 business meeting of your Ashland City Council. We will start with the land acknowledgement from Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. We acknowledge and honor the Aboriginal people on whose ancestral homelands we work, the Ikaruktsum Band of the Shasta Nation, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their homes here today. We honor the first stewards in the Rogue Valley and the lands we love and depend on. Tribes with ancestral lands in and surrounding the geography of Ashland's watershed include the original, past, present, and future indigenous inhabitants of the Shasta, Tequilma, and Athabascan people. We also recognize and acknowledge the Shasta village of Wakaka, where the crow lights, that is now the Ashland City Plaza.
Thank you. And Councilor Dale will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Jordan.
Sherrill?
Here.
Dale?
Here.
Bloom?
Here.
Kaplan?
Here.
Duquesne?
Here.
Hanson?
Here.
And Mayor Graham.
Here.
All
Thank
present.
you. So the first announcement under Mayor's announcement is if you have come this evening to speak with the council and you have not been here before, I want to make sure you know how to do that. We have sign-up sheets on the back wall. You'll fill that out, making sure that you indicate whether you are here this evening to speak with us on a specific agenda item, or if you have come to speak with us about something that is not on the agenda, in which case you will be signing up for public forum. Please make sure that you have put your sign-up form in the tray by the recorder's office before the beginning of that particular agenda item. That helps us bring you forward at the correct time. We have a couple of announcements in terms of the order of the agenda this evening. The first is that we had planned to identify the next budget committee member, but what we have realized is that we have two budget committee members whose term is coming due at the end of June. And rather than having two separate processes, what we're going to do is we've reached out to them. We've asked them to apply by this Friday if they want to be considered again for when their term is up. And we will take this up as a question of appointing all three of them at the same time. The applicants have been informed, so they know that we are not doing that this evening, but you'll see that on the next council business meeting. The other agenda item is that we see as we get down a little bit further in the evening when we are having the conversation about new business, we have Garfield Park concerns, and within that there is a proposal from Councilor Bloom for a particular city council process. We're going to break that into two specific separate agenda items. So please note if you want to speak with us on either one of those items or both of them, you can do so. We'll make sure that we have time for both of those to be considered separately. All right, we have two proclamations this evening. The first is a proclamation in honor of Arbor Day 2026. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-giving oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city enhance the vitality and livability of our community and serve as a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Tanya Graham, Mayor of the City of Ashland, Oregon, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim that the first full week of April, as designated by the Oregon State Legislature, is Oregon's Arbor Week in the City of Ashland. I encourage all citizens to celebrate Arbor Week and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. In Ashland, we are better together. And the second proclamation is a proclamation in honor of Independent Media Week 2026. Whereas an informed citizenry is a cornerstone of democracy, and whereas an informed citizenry depends on unrestrained press, which provides greater access to information, more points of view, and greater diversity of thought. And whereas the trend toward the consolidation of media ownership has resulted in journalistic practices that hinder public awareness by excluding or marginalizing minority and dissenting viewpoints, and whereas fewer media voices can result in homogenized messaging and the silencing of many points of view. And whereas the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedom of the press, protecting media from government censorship. Now, therefore, I, Tanya Graham, Mayor of the City of Ashland, Oregon, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of April 12th to the 18th as Independent Media Week and encourage all citizens to seek out and explore the rich diversity of independent media available within and to our community. So everyone knows there will be an Independent Media Week event that starts, it's on April 18th, starting at noon at Pioneer Hall. Lots of different activities and conversations are planned for that, and it will be a great community event, so I encourage folks to attend. We now move on to the approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, the floor is open for a motion to approve the amendments, or the minutes. Councilor Hanson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm happy to approve the minutes, make a motion to approve both the study session and business meeting minutes as presented from March 16th and March 17th.
Second.
Roll call, please. Jordan?
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
We are now to the consent agenda. Would any counselor like to remove any item from the consent agenda? Councilor Hanson?
Yeah, please. I'd like to remove item B.
Okay.
That was mine as well.
Okay, so the items left on the consent agenda are item A. We will move item B to the end of the meeting this evening. We will talk about that under the new business. Where do we put that? Under new business? Typically? Okay, we'll do that at the end of the new business section. So there is one remaining item on the consent agenda. The floor is open for a motion to approve.
I thought we were skipping.
That's the committee members' appointment.
That's for regular advisory committees.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the committee member appointments are still on the consent agenda. So we are looking for a motion to approve those. Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you to Deborah Costella. She has stepped forward to serve on the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee, and Ro Henningsen-Kahn and Dan Ruby, who have stepped forward to serve on the Health and Human Services Advisory Committee. We appreciate your service. Moving on now, we are to public forum. We have received, I believe, 6. Yes. 6 signups, so each person will have 3 minutes. The way that this works is you will come up to the podium where the microphone is. You'll see a light sensor next to you that it has a green light as long as you're still within your time. When you have 20 seconds left, that light will turn to yellow, and when you are done, it will turn to red. Jordan, do we have chimes this evening or the regular?
We have the regular beep. If it does not go well, we'll bring out the chimes.
Okay, great. Our regular recorder is not with us this evening, so we will make our way through. If you have any mobility issues and you need a microphone brought to you where you sit, please just let me know when I call your name. And you'll have 3 minutes each, and when you get to that last 20 seconds, please complete your thoughts so that we can move on to the next person. Also, please tell us the name and the city in which you reside at the beginning of your testimony. The first person is Julie Akins, followed by Eric Novickis, Clarinda Maripin, and John Maurer.
I seem to be making a habit of this. Julie Akins, Ashland. I now come in redress under the banner of the First Amendment to the Constitution as expressed under the laws of the United States, however long that banner does wave. You recently filed for dismissal in federal court of a civil rights lawsuit regarding the arrest of a person speaking before you because you did not like the content of his speech. In my view, this was wrong on your part, furthering a previous wrong by arresting a man who came to speak in public comment, which was his right, as I do today. He said something you did not like, referring to an enhanced law enforcement area largely enforced and enacted upon the poverty-stricken homeless at the request of the police chief as a fascist act. The speaker referred to the chief, a public figure who serves in a public capacity at the will of the people, as expressed through an elected mayor and council, as a fascist. I agree that this characterization was neither nice nor perhaps even polite. I like Chief O'Meara. But the First Amendment does not limit speech to niceness or politeness. In fact, it protects our right to be impolite. Agreement must be voluntary. It cannot be enforced in a free society, which we claim to be. To do so is fascist to its core, and I say the word. Arresting a person who disagrees with you as a governmental entity is, in fact, the definition of fascist. It is a key tenet of fascism to deny the right to oppose. As elected officials, you are hired by the people to protect our rights, our rights. You are not elected to avoid discomfort, to protect your employees and friends from criticism, but to uphold the basic freedoms and rights of the people, of which the First Amendment is the first tenet. Instead, you, Mayor Graham, and I lay this at your feet as the officiator of this body, chose to violate the First Amendment rights of a human person who came to you with legitimate redress on behalf of those upon whom this city, he believes, discriminates in a fascist manner at the behest of a police chief whom he considers a fascist. This was his right to say, and according to our Constitution, his duty to say. We, the people, are clearly tasked with keeping our elected officials in line with the rights imbued upon us by the founders. You violated those rights in this case, and it's not the first time. I come to you now to say this in my duty as a journalist, as a resident, as a person defending the very Constitution which created this governing body. Simply put, if you do not wish to be called fascist, then stop behaving as fascist. The criticism is not the problem. Your behavior is the problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Eric DeVickus, followed by Clorinda Maripin.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a model coming around that is of the 2200 property. And if you look at it, modeled in brown is the existing building that was the food bank, Handyman Hardware before that. And this is a proposal looking at how to maximize development there for bridge housing. And really, I've been working with a group of citizens, and we're really concerned about the current proposal to look at workforce housing on this site because it's really a limited site that we would get very little workforce housing there, maybe 5-6 units. This, which is within the climate-friendly area, so it's allowable to go up to 5 stories, would allow 66 units, and with condition, it could go up actually to 6 stories, which would give it an additional 16 units. And each unit would be about 204 square feet, 12 by 17 square feet, and the lower floor would allow for kitchen, dining, office space, and community space. And I know that you're going to have an open house, and we're going to be presenting this there tomorrow night as well. So I wanted to give a quick presentation here just to open the discussion around this. But I think this is a long-term proposal that can really address a real need that we have for bridge housing. A lot of the problems with ORA and our other shelter programs is that they have nowhere for people to go after. And this property was bought for the purpose of addressing homeless needs. and 66 units of bridge housing. You know, again, these are 12 by 17 square foot units. And they could go a long way to addressing our needs, whereas 6 to 8 workforce housing units, they're needed. We need workforce housing, but it's going to be a drop in the bucket relative to what we can do with this property, which has real limitations due to the shape. I mean, it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. It makes it very difficult to develop, so you kind of have to isolate your development in a more square rectangular space within that, which I think this does well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Clarinda Maripin, followed by John Maurer and Karen Potts.
My name is Clarinda Maripin, and I am a resident of Ashland. At the March 27th meeting, Tanya Graham, mayor of Ashland, Oregon, said these chilling words: "There is no appropriate signal if you disagree." In other words, if you agree with us, wave your hands, but if you do not, your government does not want to hear it and does not want to see it. According to Wikipedia, Merriam-Webster, the Holocaust Encyclopedia, and many, many other sources, the definition of fascism includes the forcible suppression of opposition. In fact, Benito Mussolini laid this out as a core tenet of his ideology in his 1932 screed, The Doctrine of Fascism. Counselors and citizens, what is the threatened arrest or expulsion from a local city meeting for simply expressing simple disagreement, but the forcible suppression of opposition? How far will our mayor take this? Already we are not allowed to make any noise, but how about shaking our heads no? Will facial expressions be monitored for disagreement? We are only allowed to smile or show a blank face? So I asked myself, what is the opposite of silently waving hands, and came up with a simple and elegant thumbs down. Silent but expressive, and within the rules of decorum as defined by the Ninth Circuit. This is as disruptive as waving. Tonight, and every meeting I attend henceforth, I intend to show either disapproval or disagreement by looking my government officials in the eye and simply giving a thumbs down. I invite you all to join me, and we will find out if we will be arrested or thrown out of a meeting for silently showing opposition. We will find out if our government is truly fascist.
John Maurer here, physician and surgeon, living the dream, second 50 years here in Ashland. Thanks for the time. I think it's significant that we're entering into, what is it, Media Week, is it, next week? Well, I want to tell you that we're going to have tomorrow night, in addition to whatever's going on at 2200 Ashland Street, there's a group that's going to have a town hall. This is the old-fashioned way, before there were newspapers even out, of getting work done in a community much like ours here. As you know, we've been working as a group, patients, doctors, people that are concerned as to what healthcare is going to look like in the city of Ashland in the coming years. As you know, our hospital is shutting down. My communication with executives of Asante, it's pretty clear that that's not going to change for a variety of reasons. We do agree on one thing, and that is the worst possible thing that could happen to our community, Ashland, to Southern Oregon and the 600,000 part of the marketplace that Asante serves, would be for this whole thing to fail and it be taken over by private equity, all right? Corporations are doing that across the country, and it remains to be seen just how close that's going to happen in Southern Oregon. But it's perilous. It's perilous. It could happen. And what are we going to do about that? Right here in this community, we're going to do something. First of all, tomorrow, I invite everybody's listening in and everybody here, come to the library, okay? The big meeting room downstairs, we're going to have a movie, first of all, a well-done movie on just the history of the hospital. And then we're going to talk about what the group has done in these last 12 weeks in addressing where's the hospital going, where's healthcare going. We're in a tough spot here, regardless. I'm so pleased that we have what we have today. I'm a living testimony. In fact, I wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for our EMTs being able to dislodge a 40-ton ponderosa pine that I inadvertently fell on my right foot and ankle. I thought I was going to be an amputee for sure, but the jaws of life prevailed. I'm here today and playing a pretty good game of golf, by the way, Jeff. But without that, and I speak to this point, those very EMTs, as you probably know, are being not reimbursed. You're being under reimbursed by $3.5 million. Okay, your budget right now is paying $3.5 million to what isn't covered by Medicare. I'm telling you, we got to do something about that. I've talked to the Department of Revenue. Yeah, we can put together a health district, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a buffer to pick up what's not being paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. We're going to do it. Listen tomorrow how we're going to do it, but it's going to take place. Thanks again for your time. Always a pleasure to see those smiling faces in front of you.
Thank you for your testimony. We have Karen Potts, followed by Rick Vezzi.
Hello, council members. I'm Karen Potts, and I live in Ashland. Recently, there was a Hunter Company crew installing fiber optic cable on my street, and I asked one of the men, what was it for? Was it for fiber optics to come to my house? And he said, no, it's for 5G. That can only mean trouble to me. My house and my garden are my refuge, but it's increasingly unsafe for me there because my neighbors have wireless routers with hotspots, and smart meters are scattered throughout Ashland. I am electrosensitive, and my symptoms are headaches, nausea, tinnitus, irritability, and they become worse and worse since the SOU cell tower was installed in the stadium out in the field. I'm about 3 blocks from that. And why should I be taking the brunt of all this, including my family? I'm only one of the 30% of people everywhere who are sensitive, and if that's true, and 30% are, and I hear more and more about it every day, that means that about 6,000 people in Ashland could possibly be sensitive. Some of those are children, and they're more susceptible to radio frequency radiation. Our interests should be protected also. I am asking the council to sponsor a public forum and advertise it in the city newsletter and at meetings. The purpose of the forum is to discuss what is known about wireless exposure and injuries by looking at independent, replicable scientific studies which look at wireless effects on people, insects, birds, trees, and all living things. Many studies have been done in the last 60 years, and the evidence has been covered up by telecom and the FCC also. I also handed paper out. It's pretty long read, a Harvard ethics paper for you that you can study the telecom industry, the government, and the public health aspects of this. It's very well written. It was written in 2014, and of course, things have exponentially exploded since then, so we have a lot more radio frequency waves that we're subject to. I believe that we can use the truth to take measures to protect us, to stand up to corporations and an inept federal agency. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Rick Vezzi.
Rick Vezzi, Ashland. Without a vision, the people perish. So what's the difference between a city and a town? Take a drive down Riverside in Medford, hang a left on Main Street, drive down toward the county offices. Where's the city hall? You know, where's the government? That's a city, kind of impersonal. You don't see many people walking around downtown much down there. It's a city. A come down North Main and turn on to the plaza and make the loop past our town hall. This is a town. People tend to like each other, even though we have a lot of disagreements and arguments. That's like a family, you know? I can't believe the actions you're taking against the Hellman family. They, back in 1884, gave us a gift. It's right here. Anybody needs a copy? Handwritten. That gift has stood with us, our people, for over 140 years. What's changed? Us? Why do we need legal action? What happened to trust? What happened to just decent agreements? So, from my perspective, we need to honor their gift to us. So that means a couple things to me for you folks. One is, I believe, I'm really actually quite sure, that the people who have been part of this legal action owe the Hellman family an apology, officially. The other thing that this body needs to do is to provide our people with a resolution that you intend to keep that states that our town hall will remain where the city hall is currently located. There's lots of options to work that out. This is our town. You ever hear anybody say home city? You do hear people say hometown. This is our town. It's a place where most of us really want to be, and you see people walking through it all the time. It's a joy to live in this place. And that gift that the Hellmans gave us so long ago, 1884, we need to honor it. Thanks.
Thank you. Before we head into unfinished business, we have several agenda items ahead of us this evening, as we always do. And we expect that there are folks who have come here this evening to talk to us about those items. And so I wanted to take a moment to first thank the people who came and ask the question about what is this communication that happens between the people who come to these meetings and this council. It's an important question. You will have heard me, if you've come to many of these meetings, particularly on nights when we have disagreements, where there are people sitting in chairs next to each other that disagree. You will often hear me invite people, just as was referenced, to signal us with the hand signal that is the sign language signal for applause, if they agree with something that a speaker has said. So somebody who's come from the community to come and talk with us. The reason that that is an explicit invitation is because I know what it's like to sit in those chairs, to have come to say something and to only have a couple minutes. And it can be a little nerve-wracking to be up at the microphone. So a lot of people come and they don't actually sign up to speak, or they sign up to speak, but it makes them really nervous. Inviting this signal is a way to invite that communication, to relax it, to connect our community with their elected leaders. And so I specifically invite that as a way to hold the space, as a way to invite that feedback. We can see everyone. We can see when somebody says something, and we just did with the last speaker. We saw some agreement come up. It's quiet, it's not disruptive, we can see it. And this is the critically important part, it does not negatively influence the person who has come to speak to us at that microphone. And that is why I often say that there is no appropriate way to express disagreement. Because if somebody is putting their thumbs down and doing those kinds of behaviors, it negatively affects the person who has come here to speak with us to share their opinion. Now, is it illegal to put your thumb down? No, it's not. I believe it's disrespectful, and I believe it's disrespectful to the space, and so I ask people not to do it. I ask people to simply express, if you want to come up and say something that you disagree with, something that somebody else has said, that's fine, but please, for the sake of the communication and the community discussion that we are having, please maintain the safety and the comfort of the person who is speaking at the microphone. And that's all that is. So before we go into this series of different issues that we have this evening, I just wanted to help everyone understand why I say those things, particularly when we have highly charged topics that have come in front of us. So we move on now to unfinished business. We have the natural gas objectives and mechanism to achieve policy objectives. Sabrina?
Thank you. This is a follow-up from a council request to return with an option for either a franchise or an ordinance regarding our natural gas utility. And so legal department has been working on this. I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to Johan. Thanks, Johan.
Thanks. And I think Carmel's going to come up here and join me. So yeah, we met in November of last year because the Avista agreement was about to expire. We are now on a year-to-year agreement, which if council's fine with that can continue indefinitely. We just have to give them 180 days notice if we're going to change it. The original discussion was surrounding an omnibus ordinance. And then we kind of discussed that, and Ashland is unique in that we have a lot of our own franchises, and so we don't really need an omnibus agreement in our opinion. But I did send out I sent out a franchise agreement and an ordinance that were both identical in terms, that were the agreed upon terms. We talked with the Vista and talked to the city manager's office, with the exception of I did have two people reach back out as to referencing the reporting requirements in 9.45040. And then Scott Flory provided on page 2 a requested change when there was maintenance to add the last sentence to restore to its pre-disturbance condition. But other than that, I have not heard any feedback, and I just presented those two options to you. So it's up to you guys to discuss what you'd like to do.
Questions?
Yeah, I'll start.
Councilor Dale?
Okay, so if they're identical, why are they not identical? Like, what are the policy what are the policy decisions that we're trying to achieve here with these two different options? What are the things that we need to consider relative to one is a contract, one is an ordinance? They both, like you said, effectively on day one appear to do the same thing. I want to understand if they do the exact same thing, then why are we having this discussion?
That's a great question. Yeah. No, I think Councilor Kaplan could probably, I saw you nodding along with that. But so from my perspective, there's no legal or practical difference as to the effect of them. It has to do with flexibility and modifications when you want to bring things back to council. I think with the omnibus original discussion, perhaps there was a bit more policy. I don't know that I could pin down an exact policy question as to.
Okay, so if I may, Mayor, just a quick follow-up relative to that. What kinds of things could be changed on the ordinance side that would not on the franchise agreement side that council could change?
So I think the biggest difference is a franchise agreement typically is set for a period of time. So for example, 10 years, where an ordinance takes 2 readings and 30 days to go into effect. And so I think an ordinance historically has been used to allow for that. Council right now is in the kind of the most flexible period because we're on a year-to-year agreement that our franchise agreement went with Avista. So we need to give 180 days notice to start that up again if we're going to move to an ordinance, or we can move to renegotiate the franchise agreement, or we can keep terms the same. So typically what we're seeing with a right-of-way ordinance is there is a lot of things in the right-of-way that a jurisdiction does not have control over, where we have control over most of the things in our right-of-way except for natural gas. And so typically it's to streamline the administration of things in the right-of-way, the ordinance, instead of having separate franchise agreements with multiple entities.
Okay, I'm still confused, but I'll listen to discussion here for further questions. Thank you.
Councilor Kaplan?
Yeah, I'm surprised to learn that the direction from staff, from the council, was to
bring back a omnibus ordinance. We didn't discuss an omnibus ordinance. In fact, I'm looking at the direction to staff, and says Bloom moved to direct staff to schedule a study session in April for the council to determine objectives regarding natural gas and whether a licensing fee, franchise agreement, or privilege tax is the best mechanism to achieve those objectives, and for staff to include a draft ordinance if the council were to decide to go forward toward a licensing fee mechanism. So it was seconded, and obviously it was unanimously approved. So to me, there was never a consideration of an omnibus, so I was surprised to read in the staff report and to hear from you, Johan, that was the direction, because that's never really been in my mind and never been anything that I remember this council discussing. In our case, as you pointed out in the staff report, we do have an ordinance for our solid waste franchise, where we have an ordinance that doesn't mention Recology, although we then issued a franchise agreement with Recology. We use that mechanism to do it. In other cities, and the reason why this even came up at that time last November was because many cities across the state in the last 10 years have decided to move from a franchise agreement with their natural gas provider to an ordinance. And the reason I understand that they've done that is because it gives the city more flexibility. Now, you turned it on its head in the staff report to say that, in fact, there's more flexibility in a franchise agreement because you can negotiate the fine details, with the provider, whereas in an omnibus ordinance, it's kind of a broad strokes, one size fits all kind of thing, and that's certainly true if it were an omnibus ordinance. But if I look at ordinances in fact, some of them are omnibus ordinances, but they've got a different look. They've got their whole sections that are in those ordinances that are not in the ordinance that you provided to us, that I believe, address some of the concerns that you expressed as an ordinance. So I'd like to see an ordinance that was actually better designed to fit the circumstances. In terms of the flexibility that everyone on this council talked about last November, we preferred flexibility to make changes if we feel like we need to, rather than having to negotiate those changes with our natural gas supplier. So the question was, let's come back, let's have a discussion, and let's see whether we need that flexibility or not. We've had circumstances over the last 10 years where our natural gas supplier initially provided information to us and then stopped, and we had no recourse because we were in the middle of a 10-year franchise and we had to wait till the end of it. Now, in fact, going year to year, there's no change in the year-to-year terms as there is to the 10-year. We're going on with the same terms as we had for the last 10 years. So if we want to change anything, we actually do need to move to an ordinance. There may be other changes.
Counselor, did you have a question?
I didn't, actually.
Okay, then let's move on. Counselor Hanson?
Yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate all that. I have a question that kind of dovetails into that, perhaps. So I want to give some props to the Ashland youth from Road Climate who led the unanimous passing of the initiative, which incentivized all electric homes in the city of Ashland. Fairly innovative and new territory. And I'm curious, is there any entanglements if we were to switch to a right-of-way from a franchise agreement with any kind of future policy type changes around like what the youth brought forward? And I don't know, crystal ball, I can't see too far in the future for that, but could you weigh the pros and cons relative to the direction that the city's already heading?
Can you rephrase that? Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding it. What?
Sure. So to get back to what Councilor Kaplan was saying is that this city is looking for more flexibility. And we saw this innovative policy direction come from the youth from Road Climate. And we have a new direction for this city in terms of our transition off of fossil fuels. And I see that the direction that the policy is going is it's innovative. It's potentially could run into a roadblock if we were to change to omnibus right away or not. I don't know. Could you advise us on that?
Yeah, so Jumping back real quick to the omnibus question, I believe that's what Chad had brought a bunch of examples last time he was here, and most of those happened to be omnibus, and they were just very simple and straightforward. I don't know how my office got tasked with writing these, but I did not make any policy decisions by design. Now, I will say this, like, as far as my office is concerned, there is no legal or practical difference. It doesn't matter to me. I can enforce either one. If we put the reporting requirement in both, and I'm happy to pursue that whichever way council decides. I would give this caveat in that there's no way to legislate around Avista being here. I mean, there were just cases about that. And so really, no. I mean, there's no interference with the with the climate action as long as we're not, preventing them from access to the right of way. It's just the structure of how we get there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bloom?
Yes, thank you. I see Councillor Kaplan is taking a cue from me and not asking a question. The key is at the end to say, how's your day? There's your question. My question is actually to Councillor Kaplan. So seeing that they're essentially legally the same thing, right? But this is about flexibility. So what is the policy objective that, at least for you, that you're trying to achieve in that flexibility?
Councillor Kaplan, go ahead.
It's that flexibility, because I don't have a crystal ball for what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I know that, when we signed the last, in fact, it was 20 years ago that we signed the last franchise agreement with the Vista. It renewed automatically 10 years ago. And we thought that we were going to get the information that we, had asked for and that they had provided for a time. And then they just decided that they were no longer going to provide it. Now, that may sound like a trivial requirement. It apparently wasn't trivial to Avista, and in order to get that information, we would have had to negotiate with them rather than just simply require it. There may be things in the next 10 years that we may want to do, and that's much more easily done unilaterally with an ordinance and a licensing arrangement than with a franchise fee.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're just looking forward to just keep the door open in case something does come up that we could address.
I don't have anything specific. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, let's.
Can I have one more question and then
Yes,
I'll
one
ask
question.
no more questions on this
You
subject.
can ask more questions, but just one for now.
Just from a financial perspective, because it's something that's top of mind for me is what kind of adverse effects would this have one way or the other, franchise agreement or ordinance, on ratepayers?
So as long as we don't adjust the franchise fee, it won't have an impact on ratepayers. I think in terms of the utility side, franchise agreements are more preferable for their financial planning because they know what's going to happen for a set period of time. But in terms of the city, an ordinance would not affect our side.
As long as the fee percentage was the same in an ordinance.
So
as it
that's
was.
where that flexibility comes into place. So if council at a later date decided to raise the franchise fee, for example, which is typically passed through to customers, that may have an impact on the rates.
Okay, thank you.
We don't
Councillor
control that.
Duquesne?
Thank you, Mayor. Honestly, my question has pretty much been answered, but quickly, Johan, you said franchise agreement. I read both of these, and they are very similar, and that was kind of, I wondered why we have two of the same with different headings, but the franchise agreement is what we have now. Is that correct?
Correct, with a few modifications that we made, just kind of update it, and we added in that reporting requirement, and I need to adjust, either way you guys decide, I need to adjust to that disturbance condition. But yeah, I made no policy-based changes. I just
Exactly.
basically took the terms and said here, and then I allowed you guys the joy of discussion.
The joy of reading it. So in something, if I may really quick, when you said you're going to add the addition of the reporting so that Avista has to report back to us, when you said.
I believe that's already in the one that I sent you.
Yes,
Yeah.
the franchise agreement.
In both
They're both
versions.
of them. Yeah, I read both of them. Very boring. Thank you.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding. I'm taking the opposite side of this because then if we can just adjust things unilaterally, then what's the point of a contract? I mean, I would certainly like to just unilaterally lower my interest rate at when I feel like it on contracts that I've signed or whatever. But the whole point is to negotiate, if I'm understanding this correctly. So like, among other things, a franchise fee is a complete pass-through to ratepayers. Vista sees none of that. None of our utilities see any of that. that can be changed unilaterally in an ordinance, but we would have to, right? Because, would we be able to change that unilaterally by a vote of council?
Yeah, we could change it, but it would just pass through.
I understand that,
Okay,
but I'm just
yeah.
saying if it was locked in a franchise agreement, that provides stability to a ratepayer long-term. Understand that we can always negotiate things. I just want to understand, I'm looking for more in a world of instability. I'm looking for things that are stable for ratepayers and keep costs as low as possible. And we want to do this across all utilities and so forth. But I worry that while I understand some flexibility, that's the art of negotiation is the implied flexibility kind of universally. So I guess I just want to make sure I understand the two differences between
and
those, because they're fine on day one, but they can change drastically on days 2 through 3,650, or whatever the term of the contract is. They could diverge, correct, right?
Yeah, and perhaps that's more of a question for the city manager's office, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason that Avista prefers franchise agreements, because they have that locked in, they can borrow against, they have a 10-year agreement, and for the ratepayer, to your point, they have a 5%, whatever the percentage is, for that 10-year period.
Thank you.
Councillor Sherrill?
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe a question to city staff, maybe management or legal. Are we confusing flexibility with monopoly? And is there any way, is the elephant in the room, like flexibility is so we can put more cost down the road to people that use gas? Because we've used this, and I understand that it doesn't align fully with this council or past council's climate goals. There are a lot of people that don't have the option to upgrade from natural gas to electric, even with good incentives. And I'm looking at the taxes for putting in gas appliances. I mean, $4,100 for a hot water heater, $1,400 for a range, $374 for a dryer, a few more on the list. I've heard stories from neighbors of mine that were doing remodels that pulled gas appliances out of the wall to redo the floor and had to pay those fees to put them back in an 8-unit apartment building, downtown, high-profile place. So I guess the question is it just part of our strategy? Can we just say that it's part of our strategy to push gas out and go all electric because we own those utilities, even if it costs people that don't have that option a little bit more?
All I can speak to is the ordinance regarding gas appliances was a council policy decision. I think in terms of whether it's an ordinance or a franchise agreement with Avista, Avista is the monopoly for gas in the town. We're the monopoly for electric. I'm not sure that has bearing on this agreement unless we are looking to somehow limit gas coming into the city, which we're legally not allowed to do. And so I think really the flexibility, either lane we pick with the franchise agreement or the ordinance, or the thought is with the franchise fee. So that's revenue that comes in to the general fund for the city for use of our public right-of-ways. And so, we up that fee, we get more revenue, but that's more stress on our constituents to pay that bill, right? That raises their gas bill. So I think when council is thinking about flexibility with an ordinance, that would be the area of flexibility they're looking for at a later date that is locked into place with the franchise agreement for a set number of years.
Yeah. If I may just follow up to that, Mayor. I would agree in markets like stability, but we have, as a city, tried to make natural gas illegal, and we couldn't. That's hence some of the law. So I just wanted to just ask that. So thank you for the good answer. And the only other thing I would add is there are multiple other utilities in the right-of-way that aren't Avista and that aren't the city. TID, COM, there's a couple others. But I just would look to make sure that we're taking fair care of the people that are paying that can't afford some of this.
Councillor Kaplan?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So on this question about, because I think the bugaboo is out there that this is a play to ban gas in the city. I don't think. Let me ask the question, because I do have a question now. Is it possible for the city to ban gas in the city? No. Is it possible for the city to actually cancel the service from the provider that is providing it?
No.
So that's my understanding too. Thank you. So I heard the representative of Vista at the last meeting say that they want to be, they prefer a franchise agreement because they can borrow against it. That sounds to me like hogwash because they can't be kicked out regardless. So they can make their investment plans just the same. Isn't that the case? Because what are they borrowing against with a franchise agreement versus an ordinance if they can't be prevented from providing service in the city?
That would be a question for Steve.
Well, I know that's the case, but I heard the city attorney, cite that as what they prefer. So I'm just
Well,
wondering.
that was just my perspective. I'm assuming that's why they do it, so they can borrow against it.
Yeah.
It provides them stability.
Okay, well, in this meeting, we don't have any, we heard that, from the representative of the gas provider. We heard it repeated by our city attorney, but it in fact has no validity in any independent way.
And I think just a point of clarification, staff is happy to proceed either way. We're just looking for council direction on your preference and what format. So that's what we would like tonight, because we'll bring back a finalized version of the direction that's given tonight, whether it's an ordinance, et cetera.
Councilor Bloom.
Thank you.
Yeah, or nothing, just 180.
Is there by statute or maybe even federal law a cap on how much a franchise fee can be?
Not that I know of off the top of my head, but I don't know why we would.
So I guess where I'm going with that question, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is it's kind of to what Councilor Sherrill was saying, is that, yeah, we can't ban natural gas, but future councils through an ordinance could raise the franchise fee to such amount that it would be prohibitively expensive for people to maintain having natural gas and would be then incentivized to switch to electric.
Yeah, so there's a case out of California a couple years ago that essentially they tried to do that with building permits and they got shot down by a preemption argument based on the federal allowances.
So there's a limit to how much we
and I
could be
don't know
charging
that
people.
limit, so I don't.
So I have a couple of questions. When we were talking about this initially, it was among a variety of elements that were being brought forward from the Climate and Energy Policy Advisory Committee as elements of the work that we are doing to implement our Climate and Energy Action Plan. A big part of that flexibility is why there's this conversation about moving not to an omnibus ordinance, but just to a regular ordinance where we could lay out the very specific details like we've done with the telecommunications side, but specifically to natural gas or to methane, right? So when you were going through the process of putting together this both of these documents that have the same terms, did we look at all at what some of the other communities have done, like Bend, lots of folks have been switching over. I saw in the packet, of course, it tells us some of the folks and whether they've gone with an ordinance or whether they've gone with a franchise agreement, that kind of thing. Did we look at those for any of the policy elements that would relate to our policy, our climate goals?
Yeah, and I'll chime in here. This is the part that I spent a little bit more time on, and maybe it was also where I kind of struggled to figure out what the goals were, given the amount of services that Ashland already has in-house, because I did talk to the Bend attorneys. I talked to about, I put it out to our listserv, attorney listserv, talked to about a handful of attorneys, 6 or so, looked at a number of ordinances that where the goal seemed to be to put the right-of-way, it was a right-of-way ordinance or varieties of right-of-ways. And it seemed to be particularly useful for cities where there were a variety of services and where the city was really interested in having like a one-stop shop for how to administer it, how to pay fees, have standard terms as much as you could have standard terms. And so the part that I struggled with in applying that model to Ashland is just that we have a lot of services already in-house. Like we have our own water, we have our own electric. And so telecommunications is the big one, but we had just done so much work in updating the telecommunications ordinance that it's like, well, that would be one of the main things we would have to undo or look at in incorporating a right-of-way ordinance that was kind of had tentacles throughout this, that had kind of tentacles in different industries. So that was kind of where I struggled with to figure out the kind of the goal given some of Ashland's current structure.
So I wonder if, given that we do have a different structure with having more of our own utilities in the right-of-way, if what would make sense would be to check back in with our committee and find out if there are specific policy elements that they would be interested in. And maybe this council this evening might take up the question of, are we interested in that flexibility of an ordinance, in which case we could submit that to Avista that our 180-day notice, with the intent of working on that, getting information back from the committee and deciding, what, if any, policy changes we might want to add to the existing language from our existing franchise agreement, because that's what we've moved into those two elements, correct? With a couple of small changes, right? So is that in terms of what we're required to do, is that a reasonable, or is that something that is possible? Give them the 180 days and then we work on the ordinance over that time period.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth getting the ordinance put together. I don't know how often the committee meets, and I'm just thinking from a timing perspective, it might be worth having it all put together and hashed out. But.
Are there any calendar issues with this where so if we decided in September to give them 180 days, would it start, if we got around to March, would it start in April, or would we have to wait till we get to the end of the year?
I'd have to double check, but I feel like when we looked at it last time, it was January 1.
So if we wanted to do it this year to be in effect by January of next year, we would have to give them that notice sometime in the next couple of months. Is that correct?
Yeah, what would that be, like June 30th or something like that?
Yeah. So that would be a question. If this council is interested in having the flexibility of an ordinance, that is a pathway we could potentially take, is to give them the notice that we're developing an ordinance that will be in place by the end of the year. Or are there elements along the way that we have to notify them?
No, as far as terminating the agreement, that's.
So it just is to terminate the existing franchise agreement with the understanding that we would have an ordinance to replace it by that point.
Or a franchise agreement, yeah. I mean,
Right.
We'd have to have something, but yeah.
Right. Councillor Kaplan?
Well, I think there's a third alternative, is not the franchise agreement or the ordinance, which is the, I always forget the name. You mentioned it in your staff report. It's actually what is
licensing fee?
No, it's
Ecology? Is it?
no. It's a third way to regulate the utilities when there's no franchise agreement that's agreed and no ordinance. That you talked about.
Ordinance 2245 in the packet.
Yeah, you cited an ordinance, but that's for the wrong thing, and I can't open my report. So that because there's a third, which is the here we go.
Licensing ordinance.
It is the
Licensing ordinance.
Well, there
A
is
licensing was it a licensing ordinance?
No, it's the third. It's the
well, it's kind of like how our telecommunications works, where there's an ordinance, and then whatever
Under
providers
suggestions.
want to service the city, then we have franchise agreements with Sprint, with those service providers. So there is that. I suspect that I think that's the kind of in between.
Okay. Were you able to find that, Councillor Kaplan?
No, it was not. Right.
Was it in the direction to staff that you read earlier?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's where I read it. Thank you. The third option was from Councillor Bloom.
Turn that on.
The privilege tax is the third thing that comes into play automatically when there's not a franchise or an ordinance. It's a privilege tax, and that's what regulates the ORS that you cited. When I went into it, the number was wrong, but we found it. It was for the privilege tax, and there are limits. The privilege tax can be no more than 5%, and that's what goes into force if you don't have a franchise agreement or an ordinance. There was a case, you talked about fee ambiguity, and in fact, there's all of the ordinances that I've looked at address that specifically to make sure that there's no ambiguity. They have clauses that describe the fee as absolutely not a tax and therefore not covered under those Oregon's property tax laws. Okay.
So is there a question about the ability to work with that third option?
So I think the question is, it sounds like we can work with that as an option. If we don't actually have a franchise agreement, we would revert to a privilege tax, not to anything else.
Yeah, and I would just have to look at how making sure the city's protecting itself, like as far as, any need to move, any reconstruction or repairs that need to happen. But yeah, I mean, I think that's an option. I haven't explored it much.
And while I've got the floor, I should point out that the California case you cited had nothing to do with a franchise fee. It had to do with preemption on a ban of gas in new construction.
On new construction, but it was
But it wasn't a fee. It had nothing to do with the fee. That was a question from Councilor.
So
Councilor Bloom was asking about the fee, franchise fee.
Let's move on. Councilor Dale?
Just a quick question, Johan. The franchise agreement that's in the packet right now, has that been reviewed by your office and is sufficient? Is it be reviewed by all parties as is?
Correct.
To be acceptable?
Yep.
Okay.
Avista as well, and the city manager's office.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jordan, has anyone signed up to speak with us about this tonight? No. Okay, so if there are no additional questions, the floor is open for a motion. Councilor Dale.
Thank you. I move to direct the city manager to execute a franchise agreement with the current language with Avista Utilities.
Second.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you. I understand all the things that we're talking about. I understand our values and our policies around climate. I understand about rate stability. I understand about affordability. We talked about 3, 4, 5 of them last night. We also talked about having hard decisions and having to prioritize. And I understand, and I'm on CPAC as a liaison. Happy to speak to this on Thursday when we meet. But right now, the priority for me is affordability. It's stability. I want the friction of negotiation so that we can have a good faith, transparent conversation at any time. And that's the whole point, is to have the dialogue with these things. We have other things going on at the same time where we're having to engage in good faith dialogue. So at this time, I feel uncomfortable with the ability, quite honestly, to have us just unilaterally change things. And I want rate stability, and honestly, I want friction in this particular process when it comes to putting things in potentially in an ordinance. That's why I'm choosing the franchise agreement.
Councilor Duquesne?
Thank you. Thank you for making that motion, Councilor. I agree with you wholeheartedly. When I look at rates and stability, I read the franchise agreement completely, and it made sense to me. I don't want to make changes right now. Something that Councilor Hansen brought up is the work that our students have done working with SEEP. Councilor Dale is the liaison with SEEP. There's so many things put in place, but so that we can live in an equitable Ashland and where we are right now, I am wholeheartedly in favor of the franchise agreement.
Councilor Bloom?
I'm glad we had this conversation to kind of shake out some risks that I saw. My number one priority is making sure that we're protecting the economic interests of our citizens, our ratepayers. And what concerns me is that you could have a future council that decides to change an ordinance to make it very prohibitive for Vista, not illegal, but in a way that they then pass that on to the ratepayers. And I just don't think that that's fair to them. Climate change is important. We need to address that. But the city of Ashland and our 21,000 people and the number that have gas is not making a dent in that. But it could cause a lot of people to lose their homes and have to move out of this community. And that's not something I want to see happen. So I'll support this motion.
Councillor Kaplan.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Sure.
I'd like to amend the motion to make to make the franchise agreement for 5 years instead of 10 years.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought we were on a year-to-year.
The ordinance is for an initial 10-year term.
We're currently on a
No,
year-to-year.
we're on a one-to-one, we're on a year-to-year now, but
New one is in-
the motion is to put forward the franchise fee that's in the packet, which has an initial term of 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
So the amendment is to make it for the initial term for 5 years. And so we had a second. Councillor Kaplan?
Yeah, I prefer a more flexible approach where we can make the changes that we want. The kinds of things that Vista has made clear that they passed the franchise fee through, so I don't think they're going to be a very tough negotiating partner if a future council wants to increase the franchise fee. But there may be other things that we want to do, and I'd rather have the ability to do that after 5 years instead of after 10 years.
Councillor, just after, Councillor Bloom.
Yeah, I mean, I think compromise is good governance anyways, and yeah, I think flexibility is important. There are things that might come up in the next 5 years. I just want to make sure that we're not being so inflexible that it happens, every 6 months that we're changing something. So 5 years, I can get behind that.
Councillor Dale?
Yeah, I just want to understand that, and maybe this is a question for the city attorney here, but the agreed upon terms in the franchise agreement was 10 years. Now, I understand I'm not necessarily not considering 5 years. It's somewhat reasonable there, but I just want to make sure that having an amendment that basically nulls and voids the original motion relative to executing the contract as is changes things. Now, if that's something that Avista is amenable to, 5 years, and I understand that, but I think that we have to be careful that an amendment is not blowing up an original motion.
I have not talked to them about a 5-year change.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my comment would be that is something that we negotiate, right? So we can move forward, but that's something I think if Avista wants to actually negotiate in good faith, then they'll come back, even though we've executed, you're not signing it tomorrow. They'll say that it'll be 5 years and we can talk through that. Now, I worry that we're muddying the waters here, and I understand with respectfully what Councillor Kaplan is saying, but I don't necessarily like modifying terms of an existing agreement that we've just looked at on the fly.
Councillor Hanson?
Thank you. Given that we are innovators in the policy space here, I was hoping that we could come to a compromise with either right-of-way or 1-year terms on a franchise agreement, because we don't know who's going to be sitting in this particular seat next year, and I have faith in the youth and others in our community that we will make more innovation. And so I'm curious, questions to Councillor Kaplan and legal, would a 1-year franchise agreement be out of the question, do you think, as a proposal, and would you be willing to change your amendment from 5 years to 1 year to give us that increased flexibility?
Let's go with
We're
Joel.
on a year-to-year right now, so unless we want to modify the terms of the existing agreement, we just do nothing.
We do nothing.
We do, yeah. So Councillor Kaplan, there was a question to you about revising your amendment to 1 year.
I offered my amendment because I see a group of councilors that are going to go for a 10-year franchise agreement, so I was looking for a compromise. I frankly would prefer to go for a year-to-year until we work this out. I think there's some misunderstandings and some misinformation that's been thrown around, so I think we could get to a better position if we had some more conversation, but it doesn't seem to be where we are, so I offered the compromise.
Councillor Henson.
Well, I'm going to go for what I want. And
Well, we've got to stay on the amendment right now.
just saying, if I won't be supporting either of these, and I hope that I can make another motion for
You would be able to.
status quo.
Okay, so we are now still discussing the amendment to change the terms to 5 years. Councillor Sherrill.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate Councilor Kaplan's compromise to look at 5 years for more flexibility, but I just see in the data, even this current council, the flexibility means putting more pressure on that utility, which therefore costs the ratepayer more money and gives them less options. And that's not an open market system that I can support.
So I have some thoughts. The very top concern of this community is wildfire risk, which has skyrocketed over the last 5 to 10 years because of the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. We know that burning fossil gas is a primary cause of that. And when we look at the few places we can touch, maintaining flexibility in a franchise fee is an important part, not so that they can be gouged, but so that we actually are not locking a future council into something where they feel like their hands are tied. One of the things that we should keep in mind is that Avista's franchise fee is significantly lower than the other utilities. So we would be, in effect, on some level, subsidizing the very utility that we have concerns about in terms of the future of our children. No one is talking about raising it from 5% right now, and given that a lot of other rates have gone up, I wouldn't be suggesting that right now either, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't be appropriate in a couple of years down the line. Locking this in for 10 years when we're not locking in other franchise agreements, to me, seems strange. And it seems like it doesn't align with the values of the many young people who've been in this room asking us to please do whatever we can do with whatever we can touch. And so locking this in for when we're talking about the amendment now, 5 years is better than 10. 1 year with the added request of getting us the information that we need, having that, putting that in and getting it through for a year and testing it and seeing how we think about that and is it working the way we want it to work, that to me is even better. But 5 years is better than 10. And I would hope that we would move forward in a way that isn't about creating a shocky system for our utility provider, but is about protecting the flexibility so that this community can respond and can actually make sure that it gets appropriately compensated for that right of way. We don't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know what those needs are going to be. We don't know what those costs are going to be. And so, to me, we have to be very, very careful in this decision. Are there any other thoughts on or comments on the amendment? Okay. Roll call, please, on the amendment.
Sherrill.
No.
Dale.
No.
Bloom.
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Duquesne. No. Hanson.
No.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Wait.
No, it was a 4 to 2?
Yeah.
Oh, no. You said yes.
1, 2, 3. Oh, you're right.
You said yes, right?
No, we only have 2 yeses.
Well, Hanson said no. Okay, so that's what I understand. Okay, so here we are back to the main motion.
Sherrill.
Yes. Oh, hold on. We're back to the main motion. Is there any other discussion?
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you. A quick Google search here shows us that Avista is planning on raising their rates 14% in 2027, with the additional annual increases through 2030 for another 25%. I'm not suggesting that we, increase our flexibility here to stick it to Avista. That would trickle down to the ratepayers, and that's not what I'm proposing. But I think that with our climate goals, like I said, the youth are innovators, and we've seen it in this space, and I could see more policy being created if there's a suggestion for an additional franchise fee to bring the city more revenue, to do more electrification. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But again, I'm just looking at the rates going up, and not having control is scary to me. And I think it should be concerning to those gas customers that are that are in the city. So it's for that reason that I think we should go back to a 1-year status, keep the status quo, and see where the chips fall next year, so to speak.
Are you making an amendment, or are you just
Nope,
making
that's just my
comment?
discussion, but I would love to make a motion, but we're not there yet.
Well, we're about to vote on the main motion,
Right.
so. Any other discussion about the main motion, which has not been amended? Councillor Kaplan, did you have something?
So just to understand what Councilor Hanson just stated, which is that in order to go for a year-to-year, continue at a year-to-year, that would be a no vote on this franchise agreement.
Right. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Kaplan,
No.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Hanson.
No.
Motion passes.
All right, we're going to take a break. We will be back in our seats. Let's take a 10-minute break. Be back at 7:35. Councilors. We are back to the next section of new business. Requested information on City Hall repairs. Sabrina?
So this is a follow-up information from the special meeting you all had while I was on vacation. So I'm going to hand it off to Jordan, who put this together.
Yeah, thank you. So this was just in direct questions to questions that were asked during the meeting that we did not have staff on hand to answer. It's just informational only. The one other update that came in after the agenda packet was published is that we got accepted a bid for the raft repair for $5,700, and we're moving forward with that repair.
Are there any questions about the information provided in the packet? Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, so my understanding is that really the raft repair and electrical are kind of the two immediate in order to, if decided, resume occupancy.
Yes.
Okay, and then follow-up question on some of the estimates here. So I see the roofing is listed at $260,000, and we are confident in that based off of a commercial inspection?
No, as mentioned at the special meeting, none of these numbers we're confident in. They were based off of studies and not direct contractor review.
Okay, other than the rafter, where I felt like there was a degree of confidence on that one.
Yeah.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Councilor Kaplan?
So with these two, as Councilor Bloom just said, with the electrical and the rafter repair, the building can be used again, for example, by councilors who want to have their office hours in that building.
I think that'd be an operational discussion. I will say from the fire marshal's standpoint that they've communicated once the rafters repaired and kind of the exposed wiring that we know about is, he would feel safe with entry and exit into that building.
Okay, one follow-up question. I didn't hear anything about pest control now, but I think we heard that pest control was being handled as well. It's a small amount by city.
I think so. And it's been an ongoing
Yeah.
seasonal effort.
Sabrina?
I'd say the big question is the roof. So it's actively leaking every time it rains. And so that obviously is a big expense. And so occupying the building on a regular basis is going to be an issue because water is coming down from the light fixtures when it rains. So it's beyond its useful life. It's a large expense. We're obviously having a larger facilities discussion. And so I think, we're going to look for a direction eventually is, given that we have no budget to address this right now, looking forward, what do we want to do?
Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you. Question for the city manager. Have we looked at different RFPs to repair the roof?
To my knowledge, we have not issued an RFP for the roof.
You have not?
To my knowledge, we have not.
Because I did see the cost in there. Where did we get that cost from for the roof?
So I think as Deputy Brooklyn mentioned, it's based off inspections we've had done. So not from actual contractors, but from information we've gathered from the reports we've received.
If I may really.
Go ahead.
Because I know when I read it did talk about snow and things like that for the roof and the damage that how damaged the roof is right now. So if we could get RFPs so that we can compare how much money this will cost, because eventually that needs to be done. I believe ZC, the company that we got, ZCS, thank you. It's my understanding that once the raft was fixed, then we could go in. And then we talked about electric, and then we can go in. And something that Councilor Sherrill brought up before, the question is there anything that we can do in-house so that it won't be so costly? And I'm sure that the people who work at the city can take care of some of these low-hanging fruit. So I don't know how quickly that'll be done or what we're looking at, but do you have a timeline if we do send out RFP for the roof? But right now, the raft, getting that fixed in the electric, that's number one. Roof number two, what would that look like time-wise?
I'm happy to share with that. Since the roof, even though that $260,000 estimate, is not a very accurate estimate because it was not through an actual contractor RFP process, as you said, it is still a high enough value that we'd wait for council direction that you want us to actually invest in that repair. And once we get that council direction, I believe there is a timeline in the staff report, if you don't mind, I'm going to cheat a little bit. That'll be roughly a month process to do that requesting for bid process and then reviewing them and then selecting which one we want to move forward with. That would be kind of the direction that we would typically follow for a repair of this size.
Are we going to do that this evening, direction?
I would recommend holding off. The facilities master planning process is coming up in beginning of May. You know, part of the roof repairs, we want to know the use of the building as what's planned, because it may change council's direction. The other reason I would recommend waiting is we don't have any funds budgeted for that roof repair. And so if there is a different facility need that would like to be prioritized through that facility master planning conversation, I think it's important to have that priority weighing.
I just want to comment on that process. We have in front of the council and the community, a couple of decisions to make. One is around a consolidated space for our services. But alongside that, even if we were to do that, is a separate question about what happens with this building. And so there's a stepwise process that we need to go through in order to decide what kind of investments we are going to make. Having been through the last time we went through this, the decision was made that there were so many problems in that building that trying to fix them in its current state was not what we wanted to do. It didn't work out in terms of penciling and everything that would have to be done to try to maintain the shell and do all of that work. And so there's big questions in there about whether or not what kind of repairs we want to do at all. And so it seems to me that right now protecting the shell, right? I don't think we don't want to have water coming in from the roof, but maybe not a full roof repair. So is that something that we're looking at? I'm imagining that we're trying to stop the active leaks.
So our priority is to keep the building from coming down.
So protecting the shell so that this body can make a policy decision that says we want to use the building and repair it, or we want to do something different with it.
Yeah, we're trying to thread the needle between using taxpayer dollars as minimally as possible so you can have that discussion and make that decision, because we have no facility funds identified for this. Recognizing that we don't want to have further damage.
Councillor Sherrill.
Thank you, Mayor. And that was a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That was kind of my question. Can we come up with a middle ground? I understand we're not going to put millions of dollars into this building, but anybody in the private sector that had a building that had to open tomorrow morning for breakfast would get a handyman licensed up there on the roof, and they would patch that. And they'd call them back in 2 weeks if it didn't hold. Like, do we have a plan? I heard originally that if we got the rafter repaired and we avoided high wind and high snow days, the engineer who the fire official deferred to said that building's totally safe, but I understood it as it would only be to go in and out of the building to get stuff. If the plan is to not go into the building at all until we come up with a better idea in the facilities master plan, that thing is going to rot. That's just my concern. I can't speak for the body, but I would think that we could easily go to some kind of licensed escrow contractor handyman to go in there and fix all this stuff for under $100,000 and at least have it open in some capacity. Like, that would be my hope as for actionable steps for middle ground. And Mayor, my question is, am I understanding that right? That it'll be accessible, but nobody's going to be using it with no plans because we don't want to put money into it until we have a bigger plan? Like, if that's what it is, just let's say that.
Yeah, staff will not be returning to this building with just the rafter fix. So again, we'll come up with...
What would we need to fix to get staff back?
So I think if you look at what's been outlined under the repair tables, so the $500,000 for the life cycle and safety elements.
This has been long conversation for decades, and in those decades, the condition of that building has continued to deteriorate, and we've got bigger issues inside that building than just the rafter. My hope would be that we would not put staff into it until we decided, and this is, of course, is a staffing decision, but we wouldn't be pushing staff back into that building until we actually decided what to do with it and we made changes and did the construction. But in the meantime, to your point, I think it's important to protect the asset and protect our ability to make a decision about what happens to it in the future. Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I would agree. I'm not trying to get into operations to dictate who is working in that building on a daily basis, but it's a policy decision on how we take care of the community's asset.
Absolutely.
That's important to me, and to us.
Absolutely. Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. As we've learned, this is a deferred maintenance situation that's been going on for decades. And whether we move it back in or not, we are going to need to repair the roof. And this, as something of as a roofing contractor, this number is shocking to me. So I would like us to do our due diligence and maybe not go full RFP. That might not be, legal, and it would definitely not be genuine of us, since we don't have the budget for it. However, as a contractor, I often advise people, with fairly high degree of certainty, an estimate. I would love to see some estimates on this. And in the meantime, to Councilor Sherrill's point, a handy person can get up there and do a lot of good with a little bit of resource. Now, we've got big rains coming this weekend. We usually have at least 1 inch in January. But that aside, we're kind of on, easy street here traditionally for the next couple seasons. So I would like, staff direction from this seat is to get on that roof, estimate, if not, a full-blown RFP. I get it, we don't have the money, but we're gonna have to do that. To fill in the gaps, do we, if we sell the building, are we going to sell it as is? I mean, there's just so many questions, but that has to be solved. I think.
Maybe the question for that is, when I look at this list, I see that because it says life cycle next to it, I see it as a roof replacement. Right, so that's not the patching process. Is staff underway with getting those leaks handled alongside the rafter?
So I would have to speak to facilities, but it's at the point where patching isn't working. So it needs to be completely replaced, which is more expensive than.
Right, so there's no way to protect the roof for the next couple months when it'll be in a dry season while we figure this out?
I'm not a facilities expert. I think we can put some tarps out.
Yeah, something to stop the active leak would seem like an appropriate space.
Yeah,
And
so I think just to be clear, it's not one leak, it's all over the roof. So I just.
Right, and I think what I'm hearing from this council is the desire to protect the ability to make a decision about that without spending a significant amount of taxpayer money that we don't have allocated to this to potentially replace a roof on a building that we may decide later to basically take down to the studs. Councilor
Mayor,
Bloom.
Sorry, may I finish?
Yeah. Oh, did you have a question in there?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
The question is can we get on that estimate without doing an RFP? Can we get that information delivered to us in a relatively, soon fashion?
Estimate, yeah.
Get some estimates, but to move forward, we'd have to do an RFP process.
Right, but like some of our partners like Hogue or Pressure Point that have done other work for us would probably come out and do that. Thank you very much.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Excuse me. I'm just curious. You said that facilities has determined that the roof cannot be repaired. It is beyond and it needs to be.
So we've been repairing it, but it's
Right.
kind of a diminishing return at this point.
And I totally appreciate that you're not a facilities person, but I think Scott is here. I'd be curious to ask his questions and he could give us a breakdown of that process and what they've determined and found on the roof.
I don't think he's here.
Oh,
I don't think he's here.
that's unfortunate.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm with Councilor Hanson on this. I look at these figures and I don't have my PE or contractor's license, but I've done a lot of this for a lot of years, and I can't see in what world these numbers are even close to correct. So while I am not interested in putting staff in it right now. I am not interested in directing staff to go spend money on things. I am interested in knowing what on this list, and I have, rafter has already been repaired or is in the process, but like the roof, like a licensed roof contractor to pass the water here, like just the basic stuff to keep the building not from, when you're, you find yourself in a hole, stop digging kind of thing. I understand there's a list of these things. My question is of the things of the items that are on this list that are in the immediate concerns, is there anything that is not on this immediate concern that we need to put on there to ask a licensed contractor to go out and bid and give us a real estimate on, which should cost relatively no money to do?
So the rafters, done for all intents and purposes. We need a quote on the roof.
Yeah, and I'd like a licensed roofing contractor to know whether it's patchable or if the roof is gone, a licensed roofing contractor is going to tell us that.
Electrical is being done.
Okay.
Partly in-house, potentially. It's still being evaluated. Pest control, we've been doing that.
Okay.
The HVAC and the water heater are only necessary if people are moving back in.
Yeah.
So I would hold off on those.
But what about just for a quote, though? That should not cost us any money to get a quote for HVAC. I mean, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, we can get a quote.
Okay. I think there's more discussion to be had, but eventually, just to put it out there, that I would be putting something on the table eventually to just direct staff to just go get licensed contractor quotes for all of these at minimal, if not any cost, just so that we know what we're dealing with.
I guess there's a question of where would we pay for it, or Counselor, are you thinking that's a secondary question? How we would pay for that?
One
step at a
I would like
time.
to go one half step at a time. I mean, I don't think council can make an informed decision with directing staff to move forward with any monies until we know what the actual costs are. And
So you
because
think
the-
it is a first step in the longer
Absolutely,
decision?
yeah, and just stop there. I'm not even wanting to think past that. That number will inform how we go.
So it sounds to me like there is direction from staff to particularly look at the roofing element, to have a licensed contractor give an estimate. And I think we're looking for, is it possible to maintain it in some fashion? And what's the full rebuild? Those two numbers. Is there a way to get through these next couple of months, or does it need a complete rebuild, and what are those two numbers? And then also an HVAC bid estimate,
So what I
so
would
we
say-
know orders of magnitude. Is that
Mayor.
correct?
It would be everything in the immediate concerns other than the rafter, which is already being done, which I think, and to your point, Mayor, relative to the roofing, agree with the life cycle note there, but it would be something like, along with that quote would come an assessment of the condition of the roof and then what potential options would be by a professional roofer. So that all should come at no cost to us when we bid that out. Or not bid
Right.
it out, excuse me, just go out for a quote. And then we can figure out, what, is it worth it? Is this something we want to the city manager's point, spend taxpayer dollars on?
Right, and I heard that electrical and pest control are already being handled.
Yeah, our in-house electrician is taking a look. There may be we're waiting on asbestos testing before we move forward, but yes.
Yes, one of the other issues of the building. Counselor Duquesne? Oh, that was your question. Counselor Bloom?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Councilor Dale and Hans. I feel like we're all on the same page here. The only other request that I would have with that is to invite, obviously we cannot, we don't have the money to pay those inspectors, those contractors to come in, but I would like to invite them to come and speak to council so that we could ask questions of how they came to the conclusions that they did, so that we're making sure that we're on top of that.
So I just want to check, because different people were having different expressions when we were looking around at this. Just to be clear, so that we understand what we would be directing staff to do. So we are looking for a roofing estimate, and then the HVAC estimate. That includes, for the roofing, if there's any possibility of patching it to hold for some period of time, plus also what would the rebuild be. And then there's interest in understanding the logic behind those elements of the estimates. Does that sound right to people? And I need a strong head nod if that looks right. Okay. Councillor Hanson.
I mean, with all due respect, as a contractor, like, I don't want to come in and talk to city council. So I think, for my money, I would just put it in just the piece of paper and let's get a description.
Get a description.
Right. I know, but we're asking, for in-kind kind of,
Yeah.
that's just my input there.
So we're looking to have an understanding of what they see, right?
So to be clear, we're
Sabrina.
asking them to come out for free with no identified funds to give us an estimate.
It's what they do. It's what we do.
Yeah, I know, but we're publicly saying we don't have money to pay for this. So I'm just saying we're a little different
But
than
we
like.
do have money to pay for it. We just have to.
Okay, we're everybody, that's the will of the council. That's what we're asking for. I saw head nods across the board. So those are the elements that we are asking for to come back from staff. And then just keep us updated on the rafter and electrician and those kinds of elements. Is there anything else that we need to talk about this evening on the city hall? Councillor Dale?
Yeah, just one last thing relative to that, just so we can put a period on it. Sabrina, would 30 days be enough time to get those? I mean, maybe I'll defer to Councilors Hanson and Sherrill on what's reasonable. I just want to make sure that we know when to expect that back, but I don't want to put undue time pressure on staff either. So when could, just to tie this up?
Certainly the roof is the more important of the two.
And, like City Manager Cota, not a roof expert, but I will say the rafter may need to be fixed before we recommend people standing up there on that roof.
Sure.
To go
And so
inspect it.
I will say that, with all due haste that we can do it to stay safe within those parameters.
Yes, no one is asking anyone to take any risk getting
And
up onto that
I
building.
think our timeline for that rafter repair would be to wrap up somewhere in early May.
Early May. Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, with all due respect, I appreciate that, but your pounds per square foot of where you're standing up there, relative to that one damaged rafter, personally, that's not a liability thing, I don't think, for me or my crew. So I would guess that that's not going to delay us, but that's just a guess.
Great, and we'll absolutely
my
have our
experience.
facilities reach out to any
Yeah, I wouldn't
contractors
wait till
and
May.
rely on their safety experience. I just would ask for flexibility around
Maybe
timing.
a big red X
from the
says,
council.
don't stand here or something.
Like a lot of those in my life.
Yeah, I'm sure that they can figure it out, right? Okay, great. All right, we are now moving on to the end of action report on the winter shelter and severe weather shelter. And we have with us this evening, I believe, Dan Cano, who is coming to us from ORA, our partner in the severe weather shelter over the winter. And thank you for your report in our packet. Looking forward to having the conversation. Sabrina, did you want to cue it up?
So just as a reminder, ORA has been our partner this winter, providing both a every night winter shelter as well as a severe weather shelter. Thanks to Deputy Brooklyn and Dan, and his team. We have the after action report. And as a reminder, ORA provided a lot of the funding for the shelter this winter, which was extremely helpful. So I'd like to extend my thank you to them for that. And I will hand it over to Dan.
So Dan, if you can push that microphone button and pull it in a little closer to you so we can hear you, that'd
Yes,
be great.
thank you, Mayor and council members and staff. It's great to be here again. I know I promised to get a mid-year report, but I think it snowed one of the days that we're kind of planning on coming in. I also want to prepare a little bit more of a narrative report. I think it's a little too soon after closing. I'm still collecting the data and financials, so I'll be preparing something towards the end of the month too that I think would be helpful just in terms of lessons learned. So one of the main goals for me after presenting and getting the okay to start the shelter back in November was to focus on getting the Night Lawn folks off the Night Lawn to as much as we could, get them into the shelter, and then provide them a space for 4 months, and then move them into Aura shelter, so to sort of extend their access to services, their ability to be stable, and link them to as many housing resources as possible. And so it's been a really good process and a learning process. I think in a lot of ways we've been really successful. The other goal for me was to not create rules that were too many no tolerance rules that would require us to exit people. Because generally the ones that we would exit are the ones that the community doesn't want to see on the streets, right? We don't want them to be back on the nightlawn or in the community sort of unprotected. And so we were pretty successful with that. We only had to exit involuntarily around 8, and a couple of them we actually allowed back in when they asked and they seemed more stable, which is not usual in these kinds of short-term programs. We've gotten 25 of the folks that were at the 2200 shelter into Aura, so 25 out of the 32 beds. It was interesting that we offered all of the beds, all 32, to those on the nightlawn, and only about 22 actually showed up and stayed. And then there was some of them left at some point during the period too. And there are a lot of reasons I think we can all identify with. Some folks just came in and they just weren't comfortable living in a congregate environment. It's tough. It's not easy to, live next to bunk beds with folks you don't know, folks you may not get along with, or just, there's a lot of people that don't sleep at night for a lot of different reasons. And so we ended it April 1st. We were able to get all but about 7 into the Aura shelter. And it's been amazing seeing the difference in their demeanor going into the shelter. There were some that we really were concerned about letting in because their just emotional state, we weren't even sure they could even follow rules. And it's been interesting over 2 weeks. A couple of them went from despondent to walking their dog and going to get coffee. And so it's great to see. We're not solving the big problems, which is housing, which is jobs, which is income, more mental health services. But what we are doing is giving an important reprieve so that they can have access to more as they want it. So I'm here for any questions.
Councillor Bloom?
Thank you, Dan, for being here. Always appreciate your time. And I want to thank you for your leadership at Aura. It's been transformative since you've come on, and seeing things like the community cleanup, I think really shows Aura becoming the community partner it was always meant to be. So first off, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Secondly, I would like to just give you an opportunity to kind of talk about some of the things that Aura is doing, planning, and kind of how you see, we've had a brief conversation, go in as much detail as you would like, about this kind of housing first versus jobs, and what is the right blend of that, so that we can kind of better, all of us kind of look at this problem in a different way maybe than we have in the past.
Well, I think the two points I think come to mind. The first is it was very hard developing relationships and housing folks and then telling them they have to leave at 10 a.m. They didn't always get enough sleep, and even though there's a place now for their belongings, there's nothing for them to do, right? Which is understandable. So I think, and it was interesting also seeing how many folks wanted jobs and wanted to be productive. Some of them were asking me, can we just stay on the property and help clean? We were struggling with that. Because then they would come in even more tired from being out there trying to figure out what to do during the day, avoiding getting into trouble, for the ones that were conscientious, and they would come back fatigued and eat, and then we're trying to engage them in the services, right? And so there's this cycle where they're coming back tired, we're trying to engage them in the services, and I think what we realized, especially the first couple of months, is we really just needed to give them space. They shared a lot of frustration. There's some clutter and messiness, so we were kind of allowing some of that to happen, and then we would rope it back in and say, you guys are gonna stay all day and we're gonna have a clean day. So I think finding something for them to do during the day is I think Aura's next goal, is really trying to create some kind of workforce program, even if it's just employing them to build things that we could give away. So we're looking into doing that. The other thing that comes to mind in terms of planning is thinking about the difference in their stability going from even congregate shelter into Aura over the last 3 weeks. It's been amazing how resilient some of the folks have gotten just in 3 weeks by having their own room and their own space and their own place to store things. And so I think that, when we think about policies around the night lawn and, how they are on the streets, we can't provide more, right? There has to be parity with what we're doing and what Medford's doing. But I think we do need to find a balance between creating a safe place for them where we're not increasing their stress every day, and accepting that they're unhoused. I think a lot of the behaviors that we see that are negative out there are really from stressors about not knowing if their things are going to be protected at night or during the day, or safe, or I think a lot of it has to do with that. Just no place to go, no place to be productive. I think if we can start to solve those issues, I think we'll see a positive impact.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, again, I echo what Councillor Bloom has said, and just phenomenal work. I appreciate that. I want to continue on this thread because I think it's super important to start to now dig into what you think it looks like and how to operationalize this. So I understand that we're starting at a base level and there's certain mental health, there's some substance abuse, there's those kinds of things that are that base level that I understand might be outside the scope. And when you're talking about these workforce groups, we have a group of volunteers, right? I don't know what the city could be able to do relative to that, and we'd have to figure out the trade-offs and limited funds and so forth. We're trying to figure out how to pay for a rafter up here, but relative to what you would say I need from the community to be able to operationalize something like workforce, jobs, programs, something, that purpose, that hope, that means a ton. That's how you stay, and they want to be productive, like you said. You notice that firsthand. So now the question is if you were to look behind you at the community and others and people paying attention and so forth, what's your ask for this community relative to operationalizing that? Because what I see is, and I mean this, it's harsh, but it's nice, not to you, but just in general of it, is like there's a gap in organizational leadership here. And even as what you're doing is that you can only do so much. So even if it's something as simple as storage, like we have a gap in organizational management and leadership, what do you need from the community to help with that?
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind is, everyone has very different needs in this unhoused community, right? There's some that really mental health at the county needs to step up. But I would say the ones that are employable, a lot of the substance use is just because there's nothing else to do. And I think that, if you own a business or some kind of where you have liability insurance and you can employ some of these guys and some of these women to sweep floors, do it, because that puts them into the marketable, money in their pocket for work they're doing, allows them to be able to work for renting a room, right? Or getting an RV trailer and renting a spot for cheap. We can't do that with a lot of the state money because of the habitability requirements.
Thank you, Mayor. Awesome, but that's great, but I'm gonna just kind of dig in just a little bit on the half step there, right? Mm-hmm. So, sure, but like, let's say I'm a business owner. I wouldn't know how to do that. What's the half step to be able to leverage community resources that may have that skill set to be able to market that, to be able to, market may not be the right word, but to articulate that to a larger pool of perspective? You see what I'm saying? I mean, I understand that we have to proceed with caution, but that needs to be organized somehow through this community.
I think organizations like us need to step up and do it because there's an incompatibility between this profile of persons and their needs and to bridge into being more disciplined with approaching the work and showing up. And so I think it is a social kind of enterprise to be able to create work for them. So I think that's one of the things that we're looking at doing, is really trying to make sure that we can leverage the money from donors, we can convince the state to allocate, instead of just sheltering folks, to get them into jobs. I think that's what the move that needs to happen.
So just to follow up on that, so it sounds like, and we've talked a little bit about these entrepreneurial ideas, it sounds like maybe some of your clients would start there and learn those skills and then potentially be partnered with a business in town. Are you thinking of it kind of in that stair step kind of way, where some people might be able to go directly to an exterior or an external job, but some might need some more of that internal training? So you might be developing workforce needs in-house to get them ready.
Exactly. Yeah, all of that. Some people can start their own businesses. I'd like to get welding teachers in there, teach them welding. We can build a bunch of carts for the unhoused throughout Oregon. So it could be a lot of things. But yes, that's what I envision. I also envision, I like the social kitchen stuff, but it just doesn't work with enough people, and a lot of them just don't want to go work in restaurants. So yeah, building things I think is helpful.
Councilor Sherrill?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Dan, for all that you and your staff and your contractors and volunteers are doing. We really appreciate that. Are you could you just give for our knowledge here, like your feedback of how this season went, and if you would be interested in doing it again? As we look at longer term options for that building, do you see yourself involved, and why?
Yeah, I mean, that's our mission. I think we learned a lot. We learned a lot in terms of how we need to staff it, how we need to manage it, how, we were pretty nimble with adjusting as we needed to. But sure, that's our mission. So I'm committed to, as long as we can find a way to do it sustainably, really trying to improve how we're doing things.
Councilor Kaplan.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Dan. Again, like others, very much appreciate all that you do and all that Over does. And I love where this conversation is going, because it's really kind of digging down into the gaps that we're seeing. You said pretty articulately, I think, that you saw this whole range from the night lawn. You're trying to get people just in a better space into the 2200, and people were in 2200, and that made a difference. But you found some challenges. People had to leave at 10:30, and they had a place to put their. People on the night lawn don't have much of a place to put their stuff. People go into congregate shelter. They have to deal with other people. They have a place to put their stuff, but they still have to leave, and they don't necessarily have a place to go. You saw a really appreciable improvement once those who were able to get into the Over Center, where it's non-congregate. They've got their own room. They have much more control over their lives, and they're maybe at that point better able to participate in some of these kind of occupational kind of things that you're describing. So I'd love to see all that, and a lot of this stuff was also described in the city in a group of collaborators, residents of Ashland, did a homeless services assessment report a couple of years ago, and a lot of this is laid out in there as well. So I think we're not building from scratch. We're really building from a lot of know-how and diagnosis, and really trying to go forward. But I love the way you described it, and also how important it is, your emphasis, I think, on the end of the day, it's housing, but there needs to be this step after shelter into a non-congregate space, and finding a way to use our 2200 Ashland Street space for that kind of non-congregate space as well on the grounds. And I appreciate the ad hoc committee that's been talking about use of the grounds. Whether we heard of somebody speak to it tonight about workforce housing or bridge housing or something like that. There's been some discussion of that, I know, in the ad hoc committee. I see all of these things coming together and working possibly together in a productive way. Funding, if there's funding available for those kinds of things. So does that square with your diagnosis of where things go and the kind of mission that you can take on with other partners? Yeah, I think what saddened me was this: when you see folks that are going through this, but you see them wanting to work and willing to work. That's the community capacity that we're missing out on. And so I always look for that stuff. Even like the folks that are here sharing their concerns, right? That's like, we need more activists that are in this issue, because they become then our supporters for certain projects that are important to solve these problems. And so I see that as adding capacity. Yeah, and during the day, because there's a critical need we talk so often about the nighttime, and our camping space outside is for giving people a place to sleep at night, but there has to be a place for people to be during the day as well. Right.
Councillor Duquesne.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Many of my questions were asked and answered, thank you. But just kind of to go back to working, and so many people want to work. And something that you touched on is sometimes people are drinking or doing whatever because there's nothing to do. And I completely understand that. When I was on the night, helping on the night lawn, we would have people, a couple of gentlemen, older gentlemen would come up and ask these guys, hey, do you want to work? I have to move this and do the other. And I was pleasantly surprised to see, hey, yeah, and they'd go get their buddy and then they'd go to work and grab their egg salad sandwich. That was my specialty. And they're down the road. So when I look at the night lawn, my experience there with people wanting to work, how many people, when you look at 2,200 percentage-wise, did you have a large percentage of people who wanted to work and do something during the day?
Yeah, I would say probably 75% were employable.
Exactly. And I went to a meeting at the library one time, and a young man, he was very hands-on when you talk about welding. He was into construction. And so I believe we have a very engaged community, and I would love to talk to you off record, not here, about how I could better help, how we could get our community involved in this, because what I saw on the night lawn, I was pleasantly surprised to see people just who lived around the area just go up to the night lawn and ask guys, hey, are you willing to move this and that for me? So you had mentioned people who have businesses and license to be able to do that. I wonder if there's any way that if someone just needed people to move things. We have a community of people, a large community of people who are over the age of 65 and just need some things moved around in their house or yard work or whatever, things like that that can be very hands-on. Do you think that would be doable?
I think this.
Oh, your microphone had popped off there. There you go.
I think the conversations need to happen and they get interesting because liability comes into play, insurance. Like as a nonprofit director, I have to be careful. Are they now employees? So, but I think that volunteers can do a lot. I think that we can adopt programs. I don't necessarily want to become a staffing agency.
Yeah.
But there are things the community can do to support that where there's liability that's shared.
One quick follow-up. Earlier, Dan, you did say that I think that this organization is going to have to stand up. So what did you mean by that?
Well, I mean that I'm actively looking at, our board is actively looking at ways that we can start to focus our efforts on hiring unhoused folks that are here.
Good.
And having them build things. Having them weld carts and design them for unhoused people and giving them away throughout the county. So yeah, we're actively looking at that.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan, thank you and staff for just an incredible first year. And it's been a long, hard pull for the city staff, for the neighborhoods, for everybody to, get to where we are now. So thank you. And also the money, the grant that you brought in to help fund this.
Yeah.
So I do have a question, and I don't know the rules around job boards. I'm curious, can you post a job board within the facility and have hands off and let that communication just go between those that need help and those seeking work? Or is that like not a litigious place that we can go to?
I think that's a conversation that would be great. I think there's ways of getting around that. There's some things internally I think that are interesting dynamics in Aura is fairness, right? Whose names are we putting up there?
Yeah, okay.
We may think someone is ready, or we may think someone's not ready, but they do, and they want their name up. So there's little fairness things that we have to get around when we start to think about those. But I think that there's things we can do start to look at that happening.
Okay, yeah, as a business and a contractor here in town, I can't really go out and hire somebody for a onesie, twosie, because we're just not tooled up for that. But as a person who needs help, having access to some place where I can stick my ad, if you will, would be something I would
Absolutely,
be what
yeah.
I would be interested in. I don't have a farm or anything big like that, but but occasionally, yeah.
I hear you from the person that's looking for someone's side. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we'd probably want to not have you get 1,000 phone calls, but if somebody is activated enough to make that phone call, that says something.
Right. Well, I mean, shit, if I put my name out there and I get 1,000 phone calls, cool.
Great.
But anyways, but thank you for all
Hopefully
you
not
do.
from the same person.
Right. Very eager. Yes, you're hired. Thank you. No, appreciate you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks.
And everybody who's pitched in, all the community, all the
Yeah,
staff.
and there's a lot of folks here that pitched in. So
I know.
thank you.
There's a
all of you.
lot of time, a lot of hours as I look around at all these incredible rock stars. Thank you all.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and so this is the point in the discussion where I unfortunately will probably be somewhat of a buzzkill here and bring this conversation kind of back to some bit of reality that I hope for we can work from. But these are all great ideas, and it's inspiring, and it's cool, and it's wonderful, and I'm sure we can execute on this to varying degrees and figure out what the efficiencies are over time and so forth. However, we need to have some honest conversations of the other side of the coin. There is a supply capacity and a demand capacity, and we have to look at like what we can support, what's realistic, like what does success look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously the number that is on everybody's mind ideally is 0 when it comes to someone being unhoused. That is as close to, I mean, we'd all love it, of course, but if we're looking really at reality, we know that number is somewhere north of 0. It'd be great if it were 1. We have to land on something that we can measure. We talk a lot about metrics and what does good look like and success metrics, and we can point to something and say, that's what we're shooting for, and we either missed our target or we blew past it and we set new goals. But I think what happens is we get trapped into not having tangible metrics, not understanding what demand is like, not understanding what we can do, not understanding and articulating and considering trade-offs. Socializing that to a community that doesn't sometimes not necessarily might be aligned with that. Like, why can't you do more X as a city? And we're debating all kinds of, how do you think we start having those real, honest, and quite difficult conversations with all stakeholders here?
Mm-hmm.
Community members, the city, ORA, other stakeholders, people in other communities. There's just a reality here that we need to address. And that needs to be discussed, or else we're all over the map relative to what we're trying to do. Would that be a fair assessment? And how would you think through that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that we all communicate differently. Some are more group communicators. I personally like the one-on-one, but I think that we first need to recognize that we all wear different hats and we all have different concerns. The term NIMBYism, I think, is silly because I think everyone is a NIMBY when it happens to them, right? When suddenly your neighborhood is disrupted right next to you. So I think that recognizing where our perspectives are coming from, but then also just stopping and saying, okay, we really do need to just recognize the common denominator problems and have some practical options for solving them. And so just having clear options. I don't know, I mean, I own my own business, so I default to scientific method-y stuff. But I think you can do that in conversations and then whittle it down to very practical, data-driven information.
So it's reasonable to put a number on something, at least just to start.
A number, I mean, you have the count of the unhoused every couple of years, right? You have the fact that we got 32 people into 2,200, and then soon after the night lawn filled up again. Like, you can see the flow of things, and I think understanding that more would be a start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duquesne.
Something that I wanted to touch on that Councillor Dale mentioned was the metrics and the number of people. One time, I think we did this a couple of years ago, and we came up to about 100, and we counted, Aura's guests was 55 guest rooms, and we counted the night lawn, and we came up with about 160 people almost, and that was a year ago, of people who are unhoused or moving in between unhoused and Aura.
Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks. So a couple things struck me. Dan, you talked, one number you threw out was maybe 75% would be, you thought could actually, work and be employable. That leaves 25% who really, that would not be appropriate for. So I think we get all excited about, a solution, and it's a great solution for folks that, can, do some work. But we also have to remember or think about how we're going to deal with the folks who can't. Those are the hardest cases. The easy cases are easy. The hardest cases are ones that have much more serious problems. And then the other thing just came to mind in this conversation. We often talk about numbers and success, and we want to have 0 unhoused people, and we almost sometimes fall into a mind trap as if homeless people are static. They're in this one place, and that's it. But homeless people move around. People become homeless. People leave homelessness. You've described a trajectory of people leaving homelessness and becoming housed. I met somebody today who lived in Phoenix, was in Phoenix, and lost his housing, and went to Medford, and was beat up. His Social Security money was stolen from him, was beat up, and now he's on our night lawn. He says, I'm not going back to Medford. It's too dangerous there. Now, he didn't come from Tennessee. I hear people say people came from Tennessee to come to Ashland's services, but he feels a lot safer in Ashland than he experienced in Medford, where he got beat up and has his bank card and Social Security stolen from him. So I think that all those things are the real world that you deal with every day, and it's useful for us all to keep kind of these things in mind, because we make a lot of assumptions about people, and as if it is a static problem that we can solve, and there's not really a solve. We're not going to solve anything.
Yeah, they're almost county residents. There's a lot of folks in our data we tracked, because they said they came from Medford. Once we had room, but really, like 2 years ago, they were in Ashland for 5 years. So it's hard to profile them, right? And the unhoused folks have been around a while. They're community members. The population is evolving, and their needs are changing.
So, in thinking about the metrics, because I think that is one of the interesting things from our standpoint, is we know we have this crisis. It's a crisis that is across the region, across the entire Western United States. But we don't really have a good sense of how are we doing as a community against some of these. And so I think that would be a good next conversation for us to think about. And what are some of the existing data points that we could be looking at? Like how many camping violations are we seeing, right? Where people are camping in a place that they're not allowed to be camping in. If that number is dropping, then that is probably a good sign, I would think, especially if we're able to maintain some capacity on whatever tent space, night, dusk to dawn kind of site. So I think there might be some ways to kind of stitch together some metrics from the things that we're already measuring that are easy enough to kind of look at, right? How are we doing in terms of capacity? How are we doing in terms of how many of those kind of negative interactions people are having alongside the counts? And we know that the counts have problems. We know that we never get all of the people. But I think that is one of those questions in terms of this body, which is how do we know if we're succeeding in the pieces that we're investing into the system, and how do we know how much more needs to be done? Mm-hmm. And how do we know how do we fit into the bigger system, because we certainly cannot take care of everyone who is unhoused. So I think there's more conversation to be had, especially as we go through the process of deciding what to do at the 2200 site and different kinds of things. So I just wanted to appreciate your good work and the good work of your team. Super excited about the cleanup day. So I don't know if you wanted to give a little plug for the cleanup day so that people know how they could be involved.
Yeah, I believe it's coming up April 18th, and it's on a Sunday, I believe. You can sign up online, and it's really, we're going to have some guests helping us too. But it's really just an opportunity for us to get out and walk around and help clean the community. And we're also working with neighbors to do something more sustainable, seeing if we can get extra cans out in places over the next period, if that makes sense, kind of doing an audit of where more trash is, places than others. So that's stuff we're working on right now.
Great. And just a reminder to everyone that we, the ad hoc committee that is looking at the site plan for the 2200 site is having an open house tomorrow evening, starts at 5 o'clock. There'll be a short presentation, and then there will be a self-guided tour, and then a presentation and a community discussion. But they're there to get feedback about some of the ideas that they're putting forward in terms of how to use that facility, and particularly how to use the rest of the site. So encouraging folks to come out if they're interested and be part of that conversation. All of these things are connected and linked. But thank you so much for coming out and sharing this information. And again, thank you for stepping forward and providing that service this last winter. It was invaluable to the entire community.
Thanks.
Thank you. We now move on to the Garfield Park concerns agenda item. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're going to split this. There are two elements in your packet. One of them is the Garfield Park concern element, and the second is a proposal by Councilor Bloom for a process that the city would undertake to look at the question of how do we offer night space for tenters. So we're going to split those into two different pieces, and what that means is that if you have come to speak to us on either one of those, just identify that, just write that in when you put your card up. And if you wanted to speak to both, you would be able to, because we've separated them as just into two separate agenda items. So we will start initially then with the Garfield Park concerns. Sabrina?
Thank you, Mayor. So we have had, over the past several weeks, an increase in complaints associated with Garfield Park. And those complaints have been focused on the dusk to dawn lawn guests who use Garfield Park during the day. So related to what Dan was saying about daytime need for daytime activity. So short term, we have been looking to deploy some tactics with the police department to have focused enforcement at Garfield Park, meaning officers are spending more time directly observing behaviors and enforcing when necessary. And Aura is helping us as well by doing outreach to individuals who most use the park after staying on the night lawn to see if they can provide support and services to help address some of these concerns that are coming from the neighborhood. I think this leads into a bigger council discussion about kind of the city's role with homeless service provision. So how we want to continue to provide dusk to dawn facilities, where they'd be located, what the city's role is, what the resources are that we have to address these issues. We are committed to ensuring that the park is a place where everyone can be. That's what parks are for. And so I think really we're looking for council to provide direction, if you would like to give policy direction around Garfield Park, and then we can transition to the next item.
And so what we would do at this particular part of this item is to talk about anything that we're looking at that would be specific to the immediate concerns at Garfield Park, because then we'll take up the proposal for the figuring out that longer term aspect of it. So with that in mind, Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things that you read off here, but I think it's important to highlight too, using unmarked vehicles. One of the concerns that I've heard is that behaviors change when the police roll around, right? But I mean, that's where teenagers experience the same thing, act a little bit differently. And then the e-bike team patrolling our parks a lot more, I think is really helpful. So kind of beyond that, and you mentioned about Aura, and maybe Dan can speak to this, and I've spoken to Dan that really a big push is more storage, more secured storage, right? We have storage, but maybe there's some trust issues from the unhoused about whether they can trust leaving their things there and not have them be stolen. I'd be curious to hear from APD's perspective on, until we can come up with a better kind of plan for the night lawn, what would it look like for them to stay, 24/7 to help mitigate that? I know obviously there's public health concerns related to that, and so I'd just be curious to kind of get a little bit more information, kind of flesh out why that would be such a negative over the next, let's say, just 3-4 months doing that.
So just to clarify, you mean residents on the lawn stay?
So it wouldn't be a dusk to dawn. It would be yeah.
For a minute, I was thinking like PD staying in the park 24/7.
No.
So I just got in a weird way. So just
and
wanted
I would
to clarify.
and just to be clear too. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily even suggest that folks would still have to break down their tents.
Yeah.
But they could store it. It's an eye shot of the parking lot. They could still kind of hang out on the lawn. But there's still that breaking down of the tents, every morning. It's not just here are these spots and nobody else can come because it's full.
Yeah, I think this is really a policy question for council regarding the city's actions around what we do with homelessness. And so I think, right now, police has really taken on kind of the regulatory function of the night lawn based on the geography. I'm grateful to Aura. They have been, partnering with us for, gosh, I think it's almost been a year now, time flies, regarding the lawn and storage, which I think has really kind of created a better environment for those who are utilizing those services. I think the idea with the lawn, when it came into effect, was to provide the required space per our city ordinance. And so I think it's kind of a council decision of like what level we want to provide moving forward. I think, the trouble we're having is, our police department is limited and they're not trained in social services. And so that burden continues to be on them to kind of monitor and enforce because we don't have a service provider 24/7 at the night lawn.
Right.
I think, staff is preparing an RFP for a severe weather shelter for like the next year, right? Because that's the question of like, how do we provide these services, not being qualified service providers as a city, and how do we do it in a way that kind of pencils for the organizations that can provide that service. And so looking at, having the funds to have a 24/7, service provider on the night lawn, I mean, that's a significant expense that the city could potentially take on if that's council's wish long-term. So I think my concern with people being on there 24/7 is, one, the burden that kind of becomes the police department's burden based on location. But also that, we're still kind of doing a bare minimum of providing a place to stay without necessarily a connection to services, which, much like I'm not a roofer, I'm not a service provider, I think that is really kind of a key element in helping people transition out of that situation.
Yeah. So could I follow it up? Because so I guess I'm looking at, we've got two situations. We've got two issues before us, right?
Yeah.
What is going to happen with that? Right? Because that was a decision made because of the camping ordinance. We're going to do this, and we never really spent a lot of time to figure that out and flesh that out, right? Which has kind of got us into this position in the first place, which is creating the spillover into Garfield Park. Okay, so that needs to be solved. That's a long-term, that's a conversation that needs to happen, which obviously we're going to be talking about a little bit. What I'm speaking to is the concerns for the residents in the neighborhood in Garfield Park. What can we do over the next 3 months to mitigate that impact while we, as a body, come up with something that's more permanent that will eventually, inevitably, will address that issue as well? So that's what I mean by staying 24/7. I'm not saying, oh, let's just do this little one quick policy change and now it's 24/7 and then we can wash our hands and move on. I'm saying, what can we do in the immediate to address the concerns of the neighborhood while we work on a more long-term solution?
Yeah, I think you could have people reside there 24/7, but there's no guarantee that those effects will not continue in the park. So I don't have an answer. I guess I think it's probably trial and error. We can try and adjust that and see kind of the impact that that it has and see if it addresses it. I think, you run into the issue of the externalities that we're seeing may not be completely mitigated by this action.
Councillor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate those questions. Those were really good questions, and something that made mention, if the guests that are on the lawn right now were to stay there 24/7 and to have storage, whereas they could store their things but still stay on the lawn, if we were going to implement the increase in concerns at Garfield Park and implement all of these things that are in this packet that the police are going to be doing and conducting all of this reinforcement, what's the difference if they're on the night lawn or at the park? I mean, if we're going to go ahead and put forth all of this additional police force, what difference does it make if they're here or there?
Again, I think it's just the cost that we're incurring by having the lawn, and I think the impact it has on the city staff.
Well, and then I have a question, because something that when I speak to the residents in the neighborhood, and this, by the time we figure this all out, another summer can come and go, and the children are not, the parents might not feel comfortable to let their children go to the park. So the suggestion that's on the table right now about having the residents stay there 24/7, it makes sense to me. And, or mentioned earlier, you mentioned city resources. Perhaps I would feel comfortable giving staff direction to come back at the next meeting and look at city properties that are in other locations that are close to a bus line, not right adjacent to, but in walking distance to, whereas we could look at something long-term, or at least, even if it weren't long-term, it could be temporary until this body figures it out. Something that was mentioned very early was that we got an ordinance, boom, we got to find a place, there it is. We didn't give this a lot of thought, and so here we are. So if I look at, number one, I agree, the night lawn sounds good. All the reinforcement that's in this packet that the police officers were going to do there at Garfield Park, they could do it right here on the night lawn. I understand people have to be held accountable. And then my last thought was for staff to go and look at city property that our unhoused people can go and be relocated. Most unhoused people want stability. They want their things to be safe. And I believe that this is something that we need to look at so that we don't have to see ourselves in this position again. So I would like to give that direction.
So what we're looking at right now is what might we do in a temporary basis for Garfield Park, because we're going to be talking about that longer term question, which includes the location element as part of Councillor Bloom's
This could be a temporary
process.
basis while we figure this out, because I see Councillor Bloom put together something that is very well done, but that's 5 meetings ago. Our last meeting, I think, is in August. So that means, once again, we've lost the summer. So even if the location of looking at new city resources property, that could be a temporary thing. And if it works, it might even turn into a permanent thing.
So I'm going to stay in the order that we had this in. Jordan, has anyone signed up to speak to us on this issue? Can you please bring me those items? Councillor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I've been hearing several things. Hearing the connection between the situation, what's happening in Garfield Park. We're talking about that, talking about the night lawn. I appreciate Councilor Bloom's suggestion for a temporary measure to try to, relieve some of the pressure on Garfield Park by allowing people to stay on the night lawn 24/7, at least for some short period of time. I also hear, Sabrina, your comment that the police are the de facto, guardians of the night lawn, which they don't, I don't know, no shade on our police, but that's not really their wheelhouse is really trying to do that. So I'm actually.
So I would agree, other than they enforce the rules that the city has placed.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I think we need a little bit more than that. I'd be interested as part of this, exploring possibilities of some, a partnership. Just the city doesn't have the capability to do some of these things. We have partners. We heard from Dan earlier that there's a, pretty tight connection between the lawn, the shelter, the severe weather shelter, this winter shelter and non-congregate shelter. So I think all of this has to come together, and that's pretty much what the Homeless Services Assessment Report said, although we didn't actually then take that and run with it in any way. But I do think that I'd like to see as part of this conversation, I very much appreciate what Councilor Bloom suggested. I certainly would go along with that. I'd like to see whether we can make the situation on the lawn a little bit more constructive as we do that, rather than just having it a place where people pitch their tents and are there 24/7. I think those kinds of services really are necessary and appropriate for a complement.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to bring this back to a 30,000 foot level here, and I'm coming right at the city attorney here for just a second. Yeah. So to put you kind of on the spot, and if this is something, please let us know if it's something that you need to kind of bring back to us as part of this ongoing discussion. But we need to figure out what our expectations are and what our policies are. And we need to be unambiguous relative to those policies so that staff has clear, unambiguous direction of what those policies are. And then we have to have a hard discussion about how to pay for those things too. So I want to know, and this is going to sound a little bit curt, and I don't mean it that way, but we have to have a start point. We need to know, in order to be as most informed as possible, like, what is the minimum that we are required by state law to do? I think this community wants to do more than that. I think we need to figure out how to invest in that. But I think this body, in order to be as informed as possible, needs to understand from a policy standpoint what we are required to do and those associated costs. And then we can kind of work forward from there. Time, place, and manner doesn't really have any metrics associated with it. It's ambiguous on purpose. So what can we, without running afoul of state law or any of other things, can we define policies, or can you give us certain benchmarks for which we can base policy around? And what I mean by that is something like, is there a minimum number of individuals? Is there a minimum number of space? What happens when we go over X amount? Like, what can we and can't we do by policy in our parks? Something like that. And then we can work from there. Is that something that at some point during these discussions, because these are all great ideas and we want to work towards something, but if we don't have something from which we can anchor and ground, your word, anchor policy around, then I think we might accidentally go on in circles. So is that something that your office, working with city manager office, might be able to help us? I don't think you could do it on the spot right here.
No,
but
not on the spot, and not really. Hypotheticals are going to be kind of tough too, because a lot of it depends on what needs there are and that sort of thing too. So if you're punishing, the time, place, manner comes into when you're punishing people for basic human,
Well,
so like a hypothetical of like how many spots do you have? That's not really a thing. I'd be happy to look at any policy directives and say, yeah, you're looking good here.
Right, because the other side of that is then everybody.
Correct.
Right, and so we know that we don't have the capacity of that. So we have to have some sort of mechanism to know, again, what reasonable looks like relative to that. There's got to be something, I'm not expecting you to put just a number on it, but I think you have to get us in the ballpark so we know what we're starting with so that we can put cost to things, we can put investment and so forth. Is that something that can be done at some point? Just because I don't know how to proceed really with understanding what we can.
I think we can absolutely look at any policy outline you give.
Okay.
And I think that maybe that's something that will come up in this next, in the next proposal.
Yeah,
So this is
okay.
what I would suggest. I see you, Councillor Duquesne, just a moment. We are at 8:51. We have a proposal that a councillor has brought forward, and we have 8 people who have signed up to speak with us this evening. What I would like to do is hear from the people who've come to talk with us, and then go down this list that's been provided of the bullet points to see if there is interest from the council on pursuing any of those in a short-term space, and then move on to the proposal of the to that element. So I do have Councillor Bloom, Councillor Hanson, and Councillor Duquesne who have reached out to, have indicated they want to talk. Is it okay if we hear first from the people who've come to speak with us and then pick up your conversation?
I just wanted to say something really
Quickly.
quickly, is that when I was mentioning giving staff direction to look at other city property, I meant outside of 2200.
Okay, well, we can pick that up when we come back around.
Okay, I'm done.
All right, we have several people who've signed up to speak. I would like to give each person 2 minutes at the podium. The order we will go in is Paul Bingham, Debbie Nicewander, Crystal Redding, and Brian Hawley to start. Feel free to line up along the back wall there. And please, again, tell us your name and the city in which you reside in order for you to get started with your testimony. Your light situation will shift again at the 22nd point, at which point we ask you to close up your conversation. And please go ahead, Mr. Bingham.
Yep. Hi, Paul Bingham. First off, Ashland resident, Garfield. I'll talk about that in just a second. I want to thank the council members, our mayor, and our law enforcement officer for your service. I really appreciate you all being here, and I thank my community for being here to have this conversation. This is vitally important. I've lived next to Garfield Park for 10 years. In fact, I believe I own the bedrooms closest to a major park feature in Ashland, Oregon, period, across all of our parks.
Yeah, if you could speak into the mic. That way the people at home can hear you as well.
Gotcha. I'm a common wall neighbor with the park and have been so for a decade. I've seen tremendous acts of compassion, I've seen acts of heroism, and I've seen domestic violence that I've needed to intercede in. We have an entire diverse mix of humanity that is represented in that park on a daily basis. It ebbs and flows, it changes. What I think is absolutely vital that the city address is the long and medium term. I didn't quite follow the delineation on the agenda in terms of which topic to speak on within the subtopics of the Garfield Park situation. What I can tell you is that in 40 years of living in Ashland, I'm deeply frustrated that we can't seem to come together to have a stable, cogent, cohesive plan to address a dynamic and evolving situation. Multiple times I've reached out to different departments within the city to say, I have a question, is there a coordinator to speak with? The fact that we have over 200 staff, but an inability to have one point person for the community to reach out to have a conversation about an issue that is manifest, manifold, and is embedded within the city in so many different ways. I saw my first intravenous drug use in the plaza in the early 90s, under 10. And I see people defecating next to the fence that's separating the park from my house. Long conversations for decades about the building, and it has continued to deteriorate. That is the situation we see with our houseless community. They're my neighbors. Anybody who sleeps near where I sleep is my neighbor, definitionally. These are my neighbors. I care deeply about them. And I want the city, long-term and medium-term, to have a cogent coordination. We have to have somebody we can speak with and speak to.
Thank you. Debbie Nicewander? And then Crystal Redding?
Hello, my name is Debbie Nicewander, Ashland resident and homeless advocate. Yeah, we've been seeing problems between the night-long guests and the Garfield Park residents for well over a year now, and I'm really grateful for the neighbors to get this on the agenda. and they did it in a very compassionate way. So thank you for that. I've been talking with the neighbors. I've been talking with the Night Lawn folks, and so it would be nice if we could change our Night Lawn hours. I don't think we're ready for 24/7. I think we need to do baby steps. But and I've said this before over and over and over, we would like to have weekends and holidays with no movement, where the folks don't have to come off the lawn, where they can actually sleep in, rest, and regroup. Also, the kids get out of school, and we got a lot of sun out there now, so it'd be nice if we can consistently use 4:30 as the return to the Night Lawn, so the park can be used by the children. Daytime storage. Okay, storage is a problem. There's a lot of stuff congregating over there at the park. There's that area on the other side of the Grove that continues on to the bike path. It's a perfect area for storage, and it would eliminate them having to cross the street as well. They can park it there and still have view of their belongings. I've given this all to you because of the time constraints. We need to find a new temporary location for the Night Lawn. The guests would like that to be by Memorial Day. That's when the splash pad opens, and that's
Thank you.
really when the. Oh, okay.
Your
Was that
time is
both
up.
of them?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Crystal Redding, followed by Brian Holloway, Naba, and then Kate Hartzell.
Hi, I'm Crystal Redding. I actually live directly across the street from Garfield Park. My family's lived there for 34 years, since before the park was even built. We've also seen all manner of good behavior and bad. In the past year or two, it's gotten really, really bad. And I want to say being unhoused does not equate one to being a criminal, but the unsafe behaviors we're seeing on a daily basis in Garfield Park are directly tied to key people who do live here at the lawn. I do want to support letting them stay full-time on the lawn. That's also what has been suggested by my unhoused neighbors to me. I would also support Debbie's idea to just change the hours a bit. That does alleviate what we have going on in the park. It doesn't completely change it, but that's why we need to change the location entirely. No matter what, there will be drug activity. There will be violence, so long as there are people who have those behaviors living this close in proximity to a park that is designed for children and families. So I'm going to go ahead and support everything that Debbie's brought up. I think that we definitely have to move things on a short-term basis just until we find something better while we work towards the long-term goals. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Helwig. I'm an Ashland resident of 6 years, and I just want to say that, first of all, thank you for all of your service, and also for the police, who I know get a hard time, but are there every day and are doing their best. I wrote a piece last year to all of you called Unintended Consequences, which you did address tonight, essentially by stating that by opening this across the street from a park with bathrooms during the summer, an outdoor shower, and shelter, that there was going to be this situation unfold, and several of you replied to me and appreciated my concerns. There's a lot of advocacy for the homeless people, so I'm going to advocate a little bit for the children and the elderly, and a society that is not caring for its children and its elderly is a society that is pretty much destined to continue to fail. And I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I go there 7 days a week. I am the only person there with my children during the daylight hours. And the reason I go every day is not because I don't have something better to do, but because I'm not willing to cede control of the park to the current element that is there. My children are afraid to be there. They don't like dogs. They don't like the activity. They don't like the cursing. They don't like the constant discussions of this one's in jail for this and this one that and da-da-da, whatever. But I am not willing to completely abandon what I consider to be the fertile soil that welcomed me to Ashland when I first moved here. We only had 2 dogs when I moved here. I met all of our dog friends. We had 2 kids now. I met all of our childhood. My kids met all of their friends there, where they go to preschool, who they hang out with, who we go to church with. And it is a very, very special place, and I would like it to continue to be so. And while being very empathetic to the needs of everyone, I was raised by a single mom. We were evicted 11 times in the first 7 years of my life because we had no money, and we were nearly in that situation. So I am not foreign to this. We also make food every Monday. We deliver eggs, peanut butter and jellies, lots of things to try to alleviate it. But I just wanted to further express, which I'm very glad you are addressing, we do have major concerns. People that have been living there since the 70s no longer go. They don't bring their grandchildren. Other parents tell me they've decided to go to other parks and don't go there anymore. And I just am glad that this is being addressed, and thank you, and appreciate you hearing my concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and neighbors. My name is Naba. I'm on the OHSU street nursing team. I work in Ashland. I live in Talent. These comments are of my own. I really appreciate hearing from the neighborhood about the park, and I definitely empathize. My comments are more about the night lawn. I do feel and agree that management is needed that has a trauma-informed perspective from partners. I am troubled by the criminalization of our community members that are using the park and the money that is being spent for unmarked cars when it could be put into social services. I feel that the night lawn has become unsafe for many of its residents, including women. And I am concerned that some of the women living on the night lawn have spoken to not feeling safe there. And I think management would be really important to them. But I'm not speaking for them. I just want to be clear about that. I agree that with Councilor Bloom that having people stay on the night lawn is harm reduction and it's trauma informed. However, taking tents down is challenges people who are working. We have people that are employed that are living on the night lawn. I think that disrupts other people from finding work and from the working citizens from having stable jobs. And also I'm concerned that there's a lack of shade on the night lawn. Smoke isn't inclement weather and nobody should be moving any objects during smoke. I'm concerned about that coming. And thank you.
Thank you. We have Kate Hartzell, followed by Heather M. Johnson and Avram Sachs.
Thank you. I'm listening to this, and it's very reminiscent of the conversations that we had around the plaza. 15, 20 years ago, there were too many homeless people in the plaza. So we passed an expulsion zone. There were too many people in the park, so we passed expulsion zones on the parks. I think you're on to something by when in September you asked staff to come back with alternative sites. You're busy. You lost sight of that. They came back November 17th. You can look in that meeting for some of the information you were asking about tonight. But it's time to renew asking staff to go through and pull those sites together, have a conversation, productive conversation with you and the community on what you want it to be and what the limits are. I don't think that has to take 5 months as proposed. This isn't a new issue, but I think this toolbox can be expanded. I feel like it's important not to overreact to the Garfield neighbors, just I think is what happened in the 2200 neighborhood. There was an overreaction, and yet don't ignore it. There are a lot of things that can be done in the meantime. Of those talked about tonight, when you talk about leaving the night lawn open 24/7, I don't think people are going to be there 24/7. It's going to be hot really soon, and there is no shade there. So I think a conversation can be had about the best use of whatever camping space HB 3115 winds up looking like in town, but it's not going to be the crazy people either being in the park or the crazy people being over here on the night lawn. I'm sorry, I'm trying to collapse. I gave a letter, an email to you all last night. I presented a copy, and if it can be in the minutes, that'd be great, because I'm trying to winnow it down. Much of what that neighborhood asked for is coming out of a desire to control. I get that. Much of it, some of it is illegal. please get that. It's illegal. And the police are already enforcing. They're asking for a 4-hour limit on the gazebo. The police already go to a homeless person and says, you've been here 2 hours, you need to move or I'm going to cite you. So we're already making a lot of this stuff happen.
Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen of the council, our neighbors, law enforcement, appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. So my name is Heather. I live on Garfield Street. I am an Ashland resident. I moved here last year. I had to escape deplorable living situation back in Niagara Falls, New York. I want to make Ashland my home and look forward to a safe new home and feeling safe in my new neighborhood. That has not been the case. I used to have to hide inside my home from unsafe conditions, and I'm having to do this again. Over the year, our park has become increasingly unsafe. Unhoused individuals have taken over the gazebos as they are not allowed to remain on the lawn during the day. First thing in the morning until late evening, myself, my neighbors, and those who try to enjoy the park are exposed to dog barking, foul language, threats, fights, smoking at the curbside, and obvious drug use and mental health concerns have not only negatively impacted my well-being, but the safety of our neighbors, but almost importantly, our children that use that park. I've seen personally trash, needles, biohazard materials, and obvious physical signs of drug and alcohol use. I've spoken with people who have been threatened, and we've been physically mocked when law enforcement answers our calls and have to walk away because there's nothing that they can do. We need a safe solution for both parties involved. The unhoused need a location where they can safely store their belongings, stay, and receive treatment and assistance they desperately need. I should not have to hide in my apartment with windows closed, blinds closed, and wearing noise-canceling headphones. I ask the council to give us the help and resources to address this matter for the benefit of everyone. No one, especially our children, should have to be exposed to this kind of behavior. We have been told to call our local. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Avram Sachs. I'm an Ashland resident. Been working in different capacities with the unhoused community for about 8 years now. It's not often that there's a simple solution that costs nothing that would make a huge difference in the short term. There's not a long-term solution. I'm not going to address that right now. But as Debbie mentioned, it would really help people to stay on the nightline on weekends. It's very exhausting to take everything down every day, 7 days a week. Even God got to rest on the seventh day. So, and that would be huge because the kids are out of school on the weekends. I would say even let them set up at 3 o'clock because kids are out of school by 3 o'clock. So if they can go back at 3, then the kids and the families get the night long. Get the park. And also holidays when the kids are out of school, and maybe even if there's spring vacation. Summer is a whole nother thing. The kids are out of school also, but let's just deal between now and summer. Hopefully find a different solution by the summer. But I can't think of anything more simple and more easy than when the kids are out of school, let the people be back on the nightline, let them have the rest they need, let the families and the neighbors have the park. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are, clock is coming back on, yes?
9:10.
We need to be paying attention to that. It's 9:09. So we don't have a whole lot of time left this evening. So what I would like to do is, there have been a number of suggestions that have been made regarding immediate changes that could be made to the night lawn structure that we should consider. What I'd like to do is to open it up. Some of the ideas that have been brought forward have been are different than what is in our packet. So it's whatever someone would like to make a proposal about. Let's do that in a discussion format because this would be direction to staff. So let's take them one at a time. So let's not combine them up. We're going to start with Councilor Bloom.
Since we're taking one at a time, I won't speak to the items that are in the packet, but I certainly took to heart what was said about maybe not going all of a sudden 24/7, 7 days a week, that maybe that's a hard adjustment. I also know that the schools do get out sometimes earlier than 3. So, I mean, I would propose changing the night long hours to 3:30 p.m. to 9 a.m., allow children to be able to get to school as well, weekend full-time and holiday full-time.
Okay, let's take that question up as a council. So we're speaking to that recommendation. Councillor Duquesne?
I would recommend 3 rather than 3:30. 9 to 3, I think that that's reasonable for everyone.
Okay, so if that sounds good, then what we've got on the table is starting up at 3 and ending at 9 in the morning.
Yep.
Councillor Sherrill?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just ask that we could consider 10 o'clock. I mean, by the time you wake up and break down all your stuff, I think 10 o'clock would be more fair. That gives kids more time to get to school. It gives people more time to rest and get up. Some people might work at night. They might work swing shift. Not everybody in today's market works a standard schedule. So the more time I think we give them, the better. So 10 a.m. would be my input.
Okay, so thoughts about the idea in general. We'll come back to the timing. Councillor Dale?
Yeah, we'll just say, just for a second, I would just have a quick question to staff relative to staff, services, so forth. Anything we need to think about relative to this, that we need to know to be as informed as possible?
I think it's just the same statement that when we place rules on the night lawn, it defaults to the police to enforce them right now. So that's all.
Okay.
Other thoughts about this particular suggestion? Everybody's fine. Okay, so the question is the timing, and I think we have to understand too that there are watering cycles on that lawn, and there's a need to not have the grass essentially die. There's some amount of breathing space that space needs. So I just want to go around. We have general agreement of extending the hours. What I want to find out is, do you think it's 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock? So Councillor Sherrill, you said 10 a.m.?
Yes, please.
Councillor Dale?
10 is fine with me.
10's fine with me.
Okay, so that's the first set of recommendations that we have, or direction to council, or to staff. Other suggested immediate changes, and the next person in line is Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. Yeah, the only thing, I mean, I appreciate all the ideas, and I'm very concerned as well. And the only thing I'm bringing to the table, I think that's different, is additionally, I wonder if we can organize lawn residents to also volunteer to help clean up and monitor the park. I think self-policing and empowerment and community building and all that stuff within this community is an element that we've ignored so far. So I know we don't have a coordinator and we don't have staff. I don't know what that looks like, but it's an idea. And I think that there could be a carrot associated with putting some time in at Garfield Park and cleaning up. That might be setting up early or breaking down late or something like that. But I add that to the hopper as well.
Okay, so Sabrina, do you have any thoughts about that? We don't have staff or money for that.
We currently don't have staff that we'd be able to do that with. I think we can definitely, park it for now and consider as we work with Aura around their ideas.
So is there interest in that being included in the conversation with Aura? Is a potential volunteer in the neighborhood?
With Aura? Sure.
With Aura?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we'll add that to the list, not for staff to bring back to us as a city program, but to be brought up in the conversations. Next, we have Councillor Duquesne. Did you have any one of these particular elements that you wanted to bring up?
I had a question. So doing this from 10 to 3, what is the timeline? How long are we going to do this? I know that we have Councillor Bloom's proposal that I don't know if we could get to tonight or we'll extend the time, but how long would we do 10 to 3 because this is a temporary thing until we get to this long-term solution. Wow, tell me.
Sure, Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, real quick. So I just, and it speaks to something you mentioned earlier about the timeline for what I laid out. That was not necessarily my timeline. I would like it to go as quickly as possible and condense that. I think August is a bit too late. So, but that's something that we can decide later on timeline and where it fits with the schedule. I would say that this should stay implemented, these short-term actions, until we finish that process, which ideally should be done by June, maybe
I don't
beginning of
think
July.
it'll be done by June.
Depends how long we talk.
I think that because I'm looking for, we talk about stability and how long is this going to go on. For me, I think it would be good to have a beginning and an end date. You know, how long, June, July, May. Yeah, I think we should look at giving ourselves a long runway. We had five, what I saw August. And what I was hearing about is the children going and coming in the park. And I'd say let's do it, let's say August. If we're done before then and we have a different location, we have a success and a solution, good for us. But I think that we go high and then surprise ourselves by what we get done. I'd rather say August.
So is anybody opposed to August? Because we want to get to the content elements of this. And I think the intention here is to alleviate some of the concerns in the short term so we can take up the deeper question. So I don't know that we need to put a date on it, but we should understand that that's the point of the short-term elements. Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the time frame. I mean, I don't see a reason to put a date on it necessarily. I think we want to get this work on this as soon as possible. I think we should also be open to changes. I think I heard Sabrina talk about, experimenting with things, see how things work, and we should, be open to adjustments as we go along. But I wouldn't support a deadline, an end date of August necessarily. I think that's too. There's no reason.
So let's finish going around. Do you want to see a hard end date?
If I could, the deputy chief might have something to say in terms of.
Okay, well, just come on up, please.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Dan Mullen, Deputy Police Chief, Mayor, Council, thanks for giving me a moment. I just wanted to let you know, just for planning purposes, if we talk about changing the timing on the night lawn, currently it's 7 a.m. and it's typically 9:30 to 10 o'clock before they're actually moved off. So if we're talking about changing that to 10 o'clock, it's going to be realistically 11 o'clock, 11:30 noon before that is actually, the movement actually occurs. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that for your planning.
Before they actually leave the lawn.
Correct. So things will basically kind of start moving around at 7 a.m., but it takes a couple hours for that movement to actually occur.
So Deputy Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, I think without police facilitating movement off the lawn, it does not happen. And so that is why it takes a while. They're not voluntarily packing up.
So I think the intention here is that they are leaving the lawn at 10, right? And so if that means that we are in some ways creating a policy that lines up with what is kind of happening anyway, I think that maybe that's what we're looking at. But I don't think the intention here is that it actually means noon. Councilor Dale, please.
Yeah, and thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it. And thanks for calling that to their attention. These are the difficult trade-off unintended consequences discussions that we have to call out and we have to have. So I understand that there's a little bit of grace there relative to 10 or 15 minutes either way or however that works. But to the mayor's point, I mean, to put it honestly, just directly, 10 means 10 or close thereof. I mean, it is. It just, if we're going to do this, is kind of what I was asking about law enforcement is like, I'm speaking for myself, I've tried to be as tolerant as possible, but that level is going to go down relative to if I'm hearing feedback that our APD, who is, I believe, just the best in the business, is getting hammered for enforcing rules. That is unfair. to put to have ambiguous policy. So 10 means 10, plus or minus a little bit. As long as everybody in the community understands that, I'm willing to move forward with it.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is, we have that on the table as direction to staff. That is one specific element that we are looking to do to alleviate the situation that we're seeing right now. With our timing tonight, what I would like to do, because we may be able to come to a pretty quick decision on this, is I would like to table the rest of those potentials, let staff get started and do the timing shift. We can come back to some of these other ideas after we see what impact that has over the next couple weeks. But instead take up the question of the longer term proposal that Councilor Bloom has brought forward. If that is acceptable to the group, we'll shift direction. Councilor
Yeah, Mayor, just
Sherrod.
one really quick question. Is that implemented immediately?
That's what we would be looking at, is to take the pressure off of the park.
Immediately, okay, because it sounded like maybe direct staff to bring back but it
No.
starts out. Thank you.
Exactly.
Got it, thanks.
If I could, the only complicating factor, or only outstanding factor, is Aura currently is present for takedown and setup in terms of running the storage. So I don't know how this will impact them.
Could you come up, Dan? Oh, no, just all the way up here. It's fine. You can sit next to the.
Both dance, double dance. All right.
Yeah, I was thinking just that. So my response is that our staff are equally wanting to reduce the tension on the lawn because they get impacted doing their job. And so I think we will figure it out. I can't tell you if suddenly tomorrow we can have staff finding those hours because they'd have to stay later and come earlier. But we'll figure it out probably within the week.
Great.
So I would
Thank you.
propose, because we're going to have to print new signs, like there's a logistics to this, put notification up, that we aim for Monday of next week as an official transition for the timing.
Okay. Do we have general agreement on that? Is there anything that has to be talked about with this right now, or can it wait until staff comes back and reports on how this has gone?
Just my one question, that is, when will they report back on it? If it's to with Councilor
Right.
Bloom's, and that's.
So they're going to aim for next Monday, and they're going to let us know how it goes after that, in the week after, before our next meeting. How is that? You can let us know. Okay. Councilor Duquesne, did you have anything that needs to be said on this topic?
No, I just wanted to, I was thinking, because there is a lot of coordination with Aura and then also the folks who bring food, and so that things can be coordinated. I just had a comment about the time frame and people leaving at 7 and being there a couple of hours later. My experience is that working with the folks on the night lawn, I see Aura volunteers, I see the street nurses and other volunteers going to help people to make sure that they are packed up and gone within a certain time frame. I don't see people lingering, 2 hours later. I have seen a couple of people in my time, but the majority of people are packed up and they're on their way. That's my experience.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kaplan?
Does this include the weekends, allowing it up? Because I think that's
It's weekends,
weekends and holidays.
full-time and holidays, and then, yeah.
Sorry, so I just, definition of a holiday.
Federal holiday.
Thank you.
So that's what we're looking at. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, real quick, because I don't think it's fair to this council or the community for me to go forward and lay out this very long proposal that I have. So I would like for us to schedule a special meeting next Tuesday, if I can get a second on that. Give me 30 minutes of your time so we can actually have a discussion about that. And it'll give an opportunity for staff to come back with implementation of these changes we just discussed. Let's do this properly. Let's take our times. We get paid $900 a month. We can make time for a special meeting next week.
During the day.
Yeah, it's fine.
Can't do it in the evening.
Tuesday, 2 p.m.
I'm not going to schedule it right now. We need to check in with staff and do a poll.
I can always just get a second on email and we just do it.
You can get a second on.
I can just send an email to a counselor, get a second, schedule a special meeting like I did last time.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when it is. So we're going to go around the horn. Do people want to have a special meeting next week on this issue?
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Counselor Duquesne?
Yes.
And Counselor Hanson? Are you interested in the second meeting next week?
Yeah, I'm looking at my schedule. 'cause
Right.
It's in front of me. Yes.
Yes, okay, so that was the first question. We do want to have a special meeting. The timing of it, I can't tell you my schedule right now. I don't have my phone with me.
So just as an FYI, Thursday and Tuesday of next week, we have other parties in chambers, so
In
we would have to
chambers.
do it on Zoom if we want it on Tuesday, but we could potentially do it Monday, Wednesday.
Monday or Wednesday you mean in the evening?
Yeah.
Right.
We could try to make a daytime work, if that's the desire. Tuesday day will not work because court, so I'd have to work with the court during the day,
Monday or Wednesday day?
in the evening.
Okay, that's fine as well.
So we can confirm a Monday or Wednesday date, probably Wednesday, given the time that it'll take to notice it. Right, because today is already Tuesday. So we'll confirm those, but if you can reach out to Sabrina and let her know your availability for Monday evening and Wednesday evening, if you can do that this evening, especially, then we can get that locked in.
After 6 kind of evening? What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, after 5. Yeah, after 5, Monday or Wednesday, please let her know your schedule. And then we can get something locked in, and that will be the sole conversation, will be to pick up this question. We can have some additional conversation about any changes to the night lawn.
Okay.
And then we'll take up Counselor Bloom's discussion.
Cool.
Okay?
That seems cleaner.
Yeah, that is cleaner. So we thank you, Dan and Deputy Chief, Dan and Dan. We have a few minutes left. Sabrina, would you like to give us the top line of the city manager's report?
Yeah. So it's an 8-page report, so I will pick my favorite thing. Is that what you want? Okay. So staff is temporarily at the community center, and hours are open 1 to 4 if you are looking for walk-in service from city administration.
Great.
Great. I would encourage you to read the rest of the report. There has been a request to move this report up to the beginning of the meeting. So I was not here for that. Is that a council direction to have it at the beginning of the meeting?
I would, yeah. Which?
The city manager report at the beginning of the agenda?
No, I think still look, I think, no, because we do still have some boundaries on when other things have to be done.
Okay. That's all I got then.
You also had the new business from the consent calendar.
Yeah.
That we.
Right. But we don't have time to take it up. Well, actually, we have 9:28. Counselor, would you like to speak to the Tree of Hope question? See if we can get something.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to bring this back, that the community, there was a lot of good public testimony. There's been a lot of work done by the community for over a decade with regards to this tree, and there's opinions varying back and forth. But there was a great discussion had here in Chambers. And
Excuse me, hold on. Excuse me. We're still in session. Thank you.
And I appreciate the efforts of staff to do something productive. So I just wanted to acknowledge, pull this out of the consent agenda for those that have recently commented that City Council doesn't listen to them. Please remember that this tree is very special to this community, and we did hear you, and staff heard you. And I think this is a great solution. It doesn't encumber the property with a deed. So I'm in support of it.
So we need a motion
Yes.
to carry on for 10 more minutes.
I would like to make a motion to carry on for 10 more minutes.
You need to make a motion about what you want to do with the Tree of Hope process.
Okay. Let me pull that up from our council packet because I would like to make a motion.
Councilor Kaplan?
I move to authorize the city manager to submit a heritage tree nomination for the Fremont Cottonwood tree located at 380 Clay Street.
And I'll like to second that.
Okay, we just bought ourselves 10 more minutes. Okay, so Councilor Hanson,
That's it.
or
Thank you.
Councillor Kaplan.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
made the motion?
Yeah, I think this. For some of the things that Councillor Hanson already said, I think this is an acknowledgement of the importance of this tree. It's an old tree. It's we know that it's already enjoys the highest level of protection through the Planning Commission. But I think this is an acknowledgement and will allow it to really get that recognition that it deserves.
Okay. Councillor Hanson.
Yes. I just wanted to not let it go through the consent agenda to acknowledge all the participation from the community over the years, and that just thank you for staff to bring this forward. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Councillor Giroux?
Thanks, Mayor. I will support this. The community came out in force for that tree. I think it's important that we keep it. I just want to also say that it will affect cost of the housing there because there's less buildable land. We talk a lot about caring about affordability, and then we make policy that makes housing more expensive, even if it's good, like keeping a tree that I would support keeping. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you. Yeah, while I appreciate it, I can't support this evening, and most of the reason is because of the circumstances which just came about. If this is, why didn't we do this 5, 10, 20 years ago? It's a 250-year-old tree. So I guess I'm trying to figure out that what we were kind of trying to go through certain, policy mechanisms to be able to do something to impede housing. Like, if you look at the definition of a heritage tree and what a new owner could do, they don't need permission. They just need to let us know, and by our ordinance, that designation shall be removed. So if this is here just just because, I guess, I certainly don't want to say performative. I know it's important, but I think the mechanism that was used kind of at the last minute while we were having a housing discussion just doesn't sit well with me, and I think it should be done in good faith and well thought out instead of rush to do something to be able to possibly impede otherwise policy goals that this council is in favor of. So while I appreciate it, I can't support it.
Other thoughts? So I asked to have this put on with Councillor Kaplan, and the reason that I did is because this designation sends a signal of the importance of this tree. It doesn't give any additional protection that can't be undone by the owner. It simply sends a strong signal that this community has a particular value around this particular tree. We know from the information that we received from constituents that an application with all of the background information has already been put together by constituents. We have that at the staff level. While we still own it is the time, because it has to be put forward by the owner of the property. So that's why the timing is what it is. My hope would be that we would move forward with this, because it doesn't impede the housing that might be produced there any more than, as you said, Councillor, it's already got the full protection of the Planning Commission. But I think it's a good way to acknowledge the value of that tree to our community, because it doesn't cost anything to do that. We should be able to just move that application forward with the information that the community has put together for it. It's not a major staff lift, and my hope is that we would go ahead and do that this evening. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Duquesne.
I appreciate our community coming forward, and I learned so much more about that tree. When I moved here 19 years ago, it was a special tree, don't touch it. It was protected. Our city administrator at that time, he said something that was very interesting and has stayed in my head when it was appointed the tree of the year and tree of life, and it's been the tree of everything in its 250 years. And then it's like, do we want trees or do we want housing? Do we want people in a house or do we want to keep a tree? And I've seen that tree kind of deteriorate through the years, and I appreciate calling it the heritage tree and all of the names that it's been called. However, I will not support this because I want it to be affordable. I want people to be able to come and build on that and build the max that they can. So I won't be supporting this.
So to be clear, it does not restrict the use of that straight, as, you know, if the buyer does, if the owner of the property decides it doesn't want that designation anymore, they simply request that the designation be removed. Right, okay, I just want to make sure we all have that same information. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Jordan?
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
No.
Bloom,
Sure.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Duquesne,
No.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And we are at the end of our time because we had to negotiate for some additional time here. Meeting is adjourned.